3 hours of questions that blur wakefulness to fall asleep. Have you ever wondered if your late-night thoughts are yours, or if they're thinking you? When the world quiets down, a different voice rises, not loud, not urgent, but curious. It doesn't demand answers. It simply knocks at the edge of sleep and asks, "Are you still awake? In there?" This is not a lecture, not a lullaby. It's something in between, a slow unraveling of the mind's grip on logic. Here, questions don't lead you forward. They lead you inward. So settle in. Let go of solving. Let go of resisting. And prepare to drift into a space where even the lines between thought and dream begin to fade. You're not here to escape reality. You're here to feel it softly lose its shape. The curtain between wakefulness and wonder. What if this isn't the end of your day, but the beginning of a different kind of journey? The lights dim, the world softens, but something else begins to stir. Not the frantic thoughts of daytime, but the quieter voice beneath them. The one that doesn't need to be right, only curious. You're not fully here anymore, and not quite gone. This is the curtain between wakefulness and wonder. A place where the brain unties its knots, where you can question without the need to answer. And in this space, somewhere between a breath and a dream, the mind finally remembers how to drift. One man waits at the edge of a fountain, eyes half closed, whispering to no one in particular. Why do we feel the most alive when we forget what we're supposed to do? A woman beside him, not looking up from her notebook, replies gently, "Because in forgetting the rules, we return to being human." This space is not made for clarity. It's built for softness. Questions don't land here like bricks. They float like fog, changing shape just as you reach out. Why do I forget important things but remember a stranger's face from 10 years ago? You might ask. Or, why does the quiet feel louder than noise when I'm alone? Every night, we pass through this threshold. Most of the time, unnoticed. But tonight, you're staying a little longer, just long enough to listen to the stillness behind the thoughts. Your body relaxes, but your mind begins to bloom, not with plans, not with solutions, but with stars. Questions, like tiny constellations, unfold in the sky behind your eyelids. What if the dreams I forget are the ones that remember me? What if falling asleep is the closest I come to truth all day? The brain, relieved of logic, begins to wander. And it is in this wandering, this peaceful uncertainty, that something subtle shifts. You're no longer the thinker. You're the witness. Outside your window, a street lamp flickers. A car hums by. Somewhere in the building, two people laugh briefly, and still, you remain here, suspended, listening inward. It's not about finding answers now. It's about sinking into the warmth of not needing them. Even your name, your plans, your image, none of them press against you here. Only the question remains: what lies just beyond the veil of knowing? Someone leans over beside you at the train station bench and smiles politely. They say the best questions are the ones we fall asleep asking. And just like that, your eyes begin to close, not out of exhaustion, but surrender. To the rhythm, to the pause, to the gentle unraveling of your certainty. Let the curtain fall. Let it drape over your day. Because now, we begin again. In the quietest corner of your mind, where wonder lives, and the next question is already waiting. So breathe, soften, follow me, into the first blur between knowing and mystery. The paradox of free will. You wake up, stretch, and choose tea over coffee. You pause before sending a message, delete it, rewrite it, then send it anyway. These choices feel like yours, personal, intentional, free. But what if that freedom is an illusion dressed in familiarity? In the comforting hum of daily life, we rarely question the origin of our choices. Yet, science whispers something strange. Every decision you make might already be determined. Physics, cold, consistent, unwavering, suggests that every effect has a cause, every cause a previous cause, stretching backward through time like dominoes aligned long before you were born. If we could rewind the universe to its first moment and hit play again, would you laugh at the same jokes, fall in love with the same person, hesitate at the same crosswalk? A quiet voice inside might protest. But I feel free. And it's true. Freedom feels real. But feeling and fact are not always aligned. In one soft conversation between two friends, this dilemma gently unfolds. Do you think we actually make choices? Of course. I decided to meet you here, didn't I? But what made you decide that? The weather, my message, your mood? Maybe all of it. Maybe none of it. Then maybe we're just reacting to echoes. Echoes of what? Of everything that came before. This simple exchange holds something profound. If every choice is shaped by countless variables, your genetics, your memories, the tone in someone's voice, then perhaps what feels like a fresh decision is just the next frame in a cosmic film. And if so, can we still call it free will? But don't let this question unsettle you. Let it float, like a feather on the wind. Because within this paradox lies a quiet mystery. If your life is a script, it's one you've never read. And maybe that's where the magic is, not in control, but in discovery. You don't know what line comes next. That, in itself, feels like freedom. As your thoughts drift and settle like dusk on still water, hold this paradox not as a problem to solve, but as a lullaby for the restless mind. Let it hum in the background, gently. For now, it is enough to wonder. And so we drift forward, toward a theory even stranger, where everything might already be written. The Prewritten Tomorrow. There is a quiet, unsettling beauty in watching a row of dominoes fall. One by one, perfectly timed, they collapse, not by choice, but by design. Now consider this. What if your tomorrow is already standing there, in line, waiting for the tap of an invisible finger? A man once told me, as we stood beneath a flickering streetlight, "You think you're choosing where to go next, but maybe you're just catching up to a path that was drawn before you could walk." His voice was gentle, like he didn't want to frighten the thought itself. I didn't answer. I just listened, like the night does. Deterministic physics whispers that if someone, or something, knew every particle's position, every motion in the universe, then every heartbeat, every slip of thought, every awkward smile you'll offer 5 days from now could be predicted. Your favorite coffee shop, the stranger you'll lock eyes with, the exact moment you'll decide to finally let go of that old memory, all of it, laid out like a map in a language too old to read. So, if life is an algorithm, what does that make you? A wandering signal inside a cosmic circuit? "Hey, you okay?" Someone asked me once as I paused too long before crossing the street. I said I was just waiting for the light, but really, I was wondering if I had ever had a choice in stopping there. That split second, was it truly mine? And yet, in the middle of all this mechanistic poetry, something wild remains. You hum a tune no one taught you. You write a sentence that surprises even your own mind. You say yes on a whim, and it changes your entire direction. These aren't part of any formula, are they? A child asks her mother, "Did I choose to be born?" The mother smiles and says, "I think we chose each other." There's no proof in that reply, just warmth. But sometimes warmth is enough to rewrite logic. So if your life was coded like a simulation, who wrote it? And more importantly, who's watching it unfold? It's okay not to answer. It's okay to pause. Let that question rest in your chest, not like a burden, but like a lantern. And if you drift off before it lights up, don't worry. You can come back to it another night. Now we move forward, gently, into the next idea, where we ask whether freedom was ever really free, or just the illusion that kept us dancing through the script. Close your eyes if they're still open. The next thread is already waiting. The simulation hypothesis. Is it possible that what surrounds you, the sky, the streets, the scent of coffee, the warmth of a hand, might be nothing more than pixels? A rendering so precise that your heart responds with awe? The simulation hypothesis suggests we might be living inside a vast digital illusion, not imagined in dreams but programmed into existence. Imagine the stars not as burning gas, but code. Imagine your memories not as experience, but data logged by something or someone. You ever feel like things are just too perfect sometimes? One voice asks in the dim quiet of a bedroom. The other laughs lightly. Or too scripted, like déjà vu is just a glitch? That unsettling familiarity we sometimes feel. It might not be divine. It might be design. Some physicists argue that our universe behaves suspiciously like a computer. Its structure, discrete, mathematical, predictable, resembles a simulation's architecture more than a chaotic cosmos. What if the rules we thought were physical laws are just constraints written into a massive operating system? And then the deeper question arises, if this is all simulated, then what are you? A character in someone else's game? Or the player, lost inside your own creation? The idea that we are rendered rather than born has strange emotional consequences. Does love still count if it's only ones and zeros? Does pain still cut if the nerves aren't real? One could argue that it matters more, because even if simulated, we feel it. And in that feeling, in that spark of perception, something real is happening. Something no algorithm, however divine, can fully contain. Would it change how you live? She asks gently. If I knew it was all a program, he replies. Maybe, or maybe I'd try harder to leave a mark, even in code. If we are indeed inside a simulation, perhaps our greatest act of defiance is to feel deeply, to care as if it's real, because maybe that's what makes it real. You don't need to be convinced. You only need to wonder. And as this thought settles into your chest like a warm fog, you begin to notice the silence between the seconds, the thin membrane between what is observed and who is watching. Take a slow breath, because next we'll ask, if everything is simulated, where is the observer? The mirror that watches you. There is a mirror in every room, though not always made of glass. Sometimes it's a face across from yours in a waiting room, or the still water in a morning bowl. But when you meet your own eyes, really meet them, what answers you? You're not just seeing a reflection, you're witnessing something being witnessed. That soft flicker of self-recognition. You seeing you. But who exactly is doing the seeing? One night, someone once asked quietly across the dark of a long road trip, "Do you ever feel like you're not the one looking out through your own eyes?" And the reply came back, softer than the engine hum. Yeah, like there's something behind me, watching me watch. The mirror, after all, doesn't just show skin or structure. It hints at something just behind your gaze, as if there's a quiet intelligence beneath the thoughts, not producing them, but observing them. No need for explanation, only presence. And it doesn't interrupt. It doesn't judge. It simply watches, like a gentle guardian who's always known the version of you that isn't pretending. The version you return to when you're alone in a room. No performance, no audience. You may think your thoughts are private, that they float freely inside your mind. But beneath them is the one who notices them, a listener who doesn't speak, a presence that never leaves, a mirror that reflects not what you are, but that you are. Have you ever stood still in the quiet of the night, long after everyone else has gone to sleep, and felt that eerie clarity? That moment when you stop thinking and start simply being? That's when the mirror inside opens, not to your face, but to your awareness. There's no grand revelation, just the silence, the unblinking observer, the one who doesn't age, the one who wasn't taught, the one who has watched you from the very beginning. And sometimes, in the middle of a conversation, maybe in line at a grocery store, or as the rain patters softly on a taxi window, you hear something simple, something human. I get quiet sometimes because it feels like there's someone inside me who's quieter still. It doesn't need to be explained, because you felt it too. So tonight, don't try to find yourself in the reflection. Rest into it. Let go of trying to name the seer. Let the mirror do the watching. Let the thoughts pass like clouds across its surface. And as they pass, you may find that what you truly are was never just the one thinking, but the one who knew you were thinking at all. Now, let that soft awareness stay open as we drift gently into the mystery of memory. The ghosts in your memory. Have you ever remembered something so clearly that it felt more vivid than a photo, only to later realize it never happened that way at all? The mind is not a storage room, but a stage. And memory, it's the most convincing actor, dressed in fragments, improvising its lines. As you close your eyes and drift toward stillness, imagine this: a memory surfaces, sharp as sunlight through blinds. You're there, you're sure of it. But wait, was the shirt blue or gray? Did they laugh or cry? Did you leave or stay? These aren't small details. They shift the entire story. And yet your mind does not pause to ask. It simply rewrites. Did we really talk that night? A voice whispers. I think so, comes the answer. But maybe I dreamed it. Or maybe I've told the story so many times. I just believe it now. Neurologists will tell you, each time you recall a memory, it changes. The very act of remembering is an act of editing. Your emotions in the present sneak into the past. Longing adds light to a scene that was dim. Regret casts shadows where none existed. We do not recall, we recreate. And this gentle fraud isn't failure, it's survival. Sometimes the brain deletes to protect you. Other times it adds what you needed but never got. A comforting word, a different ending, a moment you wished you had the courage to live. That boy you loved who never turned around. That apology you gave in your mind but never in person. That laugh you swear your mother gave on a rainy afternoon that never really happened. What if every cherished memory is only half real? What if your most painful moments have been softened over time, like waves eroding the edges of a cliff until the shape is almost beautiful? I remember the ocean trip, one person says in a hushed tone. The one with the broken umbrella? asks the other, smiling softly. No, the one where we watched the moon rise. Silence. Then a pause. We never went to the ocean, the other person replies gently. We talked about it, but we never made it. The memory lingers anyway, like perfume from a stranger's coat. Not quite real, not quite false, just yours. And if the past is so malleable, so easily rewritten by longing, mood, or time, then who are you really? A character built on stories you've told yourself? A mosaic of impressions shaped by emotion, not events? Does that frighten you? Or free you? Because maybe, just maybe, if memory can shift, so can identity. If the past is not fixed, then neither are you. The you of yesterday is not holding you hostage. You are not obligated to carry every old version of yourself like ghosts haunting your present. Let them go. Let the false moments dissolve into the warm mist behind your eyelids. The night is not asking you for facts. It asks only for softness. And so now we drift deeper into the land where dreams shine more vividly than truth, and where memory at last lets go of its grip. Float, fade, forget, or perhaps remember differently. When dreams feel truer than life. There are nights when the sky outside barely shifts, but inside, your mind travels. Not in cars or planes, but through stories spun in silence. A dream begins. Without invitation, it floods the room with people you've never met, who somehow know your name, places you've never been, but that feel like home. Emotions arrive before the cause, grief without death, joy without event, love with no name attached. And in that moment, without needing proof, you believe it all. Did that really happen? Someone whispers to themselves, half awake, reaching out into the dark as if the answer might still be there. No, but it felt more real than today. Dreams disobey rules with elegance. They slip past the gatekeepers of logic and plant messages in code. A voice you miss but forgot. A version of you unafraid. A decision you denied making, played out like theater. You never asked your dreams to speak, and yet they do. Without filter, without flattery. They don't care about your image or your plans. They reflect not what you think you are, but what waits beneath what you think. Ever dreamt of someone who hasn't been in your life for years? Yeah, they didn't even speak, just looked at me. And how did it feel? Like something I hadn't forgiven yet was still breathing. In the quiet beneath consciousness, dreams tell the truths your waking mind is too cautious to say aloud. They know which memories sting. They know where your longing lives. They don't negotiate. They reveal. One dream and you wake in tears. Another and you wake laughing, forgetting why. But the feeling lingers. Not the plot, not the image, but the feeling. And what if that is the real message? Not the details, but the temperature of your soul? Maybe dreams don't lie. They just don't explain. You're left to walk around all day with the imprint of a ghost that never was, yet somehow changed you. Two strangers sit across from each other at a cafe. One sips quietly, then says, "You ever feel like your dreams know you better than your family does?" The other doesn't laugh, just nods. All the time, but I don't tell anyone. They'd think I'm not okay. Maybe not being okay is what made the dream honest. Or maybe it was never meant to be told at all. What if dreams are not escape, but return? What if this life, this schedule, this story, is the interruption? Maybe sleep is not the end of the day. Maybe it's the other beginning. And in those nightly worlds where shame can't follow and fear is just a fog you walk through, you get to be something closer to true. So when you wake feeling oddly wiser, oddly bruised, or oddly whole, don't rush to shake it off. That unexplainable residue, that's the signature. Dreams don't ask for proof. They leave fingerprints, not blueprints. Now close your eyes again. Hold that softness. Let it settle into your chest like a secret that doesn't need decoding. The body knows when to rest, and the mind too, sometimes needs to wander just far enough to remember itself. We're about to step beyond time. The next thought may not be yours, and that's okay. Drift with it. Let it speak, or don't. Just be still. Sleep is listening. The illusion of time flow. You've always felt time pressing forward, like wind at your back, nudging you from memory into obligation, from sunrise to deadline, from birth to the inevitability of decline. And yet, have you ever truly seen time move? Or do you only notice it through things that change? Like the way bread hardens, skin softens, or love shifts shape. Two strangers sit quietly in a dim train station. One reads a receipt from a year ago, folded and faded. The other checks the arrival board as if urgency will make the train appear faster. Do you think, one asks without looking up, that the past still exists somewhere? A pause. Then, maybe it never left. Physicists have long whispered this paradox. Nothing in the laws of motion insists time must flow in one direction. Rewind, fast forward, still frame. None of it violates the rules. What we call the present may simply be the frame we're standing in. Memory gives it motion. Entropy gives it flavor. But the universe itself might be watching all of time at once, like a painting, not a film. You're taught to believe in before and after. You slept last night, now you are here, later you'll sleep again. But what if each moment you've lived still exists? Not as ghosts, not as echoes, but as fully real slices, layered like pages in a book you only read front to back, because that's what you were taught. Sometimes you revisit a place from your childhood and swear you feel the presence of your younger self there, playing in the leaves, brushing past a gate, laughing. The air seems thick, not with nostalgia, but with actual presence. You stand there and whisper softly, without knowing why. Don't run too fast. You'll forget this. In truth, you might never have left. That younger version of you may still be sitting under that tree, waiting. And the you of tomorrow, already sipping coffee you haven't brewed, may be wondering where you are now. So what does it mean then to change? If time is not a river but a sea, vast and unmoving, then maybe growth is not moving forward, but waking up to more of the map, seeing how all the places connect, not just birth, not just now, but all of it, held in some timeless lattice, shimmering just beneath the surface. I thought I had more time, someone says quietly to the night, not in regret, but in confusion. Because how can you run out of something that was never really moving? And you, listening here in the hush, are not drifting down time's current. You are floating in a still lake of moments, each one rippling softly outward. You are not late. You are not early. You are not behind. You are simply here. Let time dissolve. Let its ticking soften into the breath between your thoughts. In the next segment, we explore the eternal now, where presence replaces progression and everything just is. The eternal present. The past is a shadow painted by memory, and the future, merely a sketch drawn in the fog of hope or worry. But the present is the only thing that breathes. It is the only place where your feet actually touch the ground, where breath fills your lungs, and where life unfolds without rehearsal or replay. "You ever think," she murmured, "that we spend our lives preparing for moments we never get to live?" He blinked, half awake, half dreaming, like saving our favorite fruit till it rots. She smiled without moving. "Exactly. This moment, right now, does not require fixing. It does not ask for improvement. It only asks to be seen. But the mind, trained like a restless dog, runs endlessly backward, retrieving old regrets, or sprints ahead, barking at imagined tomorrows. Rarely, if ever, does it sit beside you quietly, in the warm sun of now. And yet, now is the only place peace has ever lived. Psychologists speak of flow, those rare moments when time disappears because you are so immersed in doing, in being, that the self dissolves. Musicians feel it mid-song, surfers mid-wave, lovers mid-kiss. But you don't need a grand act to arrive in the present. A sip of tea, the weight of a blanket, the breath before a sentence. These too are portals. Letting go of the past isn't about forgetting. It's about no longer gripping it like a raft in open water. And releasing the future isn't apathy. It's trust. Trust that you can meet what comes with presence, not prediction. "But if I stop worrying," he whispered, "what if things fall apart?" She closed her eyes, not in sleep, but in knowing. Maybe they will, but maybe they'll fall together. To live now is a quiet rebellion, a refusal to be trapped by ghosts or held hostage by possibility. The world urges us to plan, to archive, to anticipate. But presence? Presence is like standing still in a rushing river. Everything flows around you, but you are rooted in this breath, this moment, this beat of being. There is no replay button for this second. It slips by, soft as wind, loud as truth. So what happens if you stay here? Just here. Let the air you inhale be enough. Let the sound of your own heartbeat be music. Let time soften its grip and become a gentle companion rather than a strict warden. And when the thought comes, "Shouldn't I be somewhere else, doing something else?" answer gently, "No, I am already here." Exhale now, not with force, but with grace. Because next, we ask, who is doing the living? The illusion of the self. There is a moment just before sleep when your thoughts feel like clouds, drifting, ungraspable. In that quiet haze, have you ever asked yourself, who is thinking these thoughts? Not your name, not your history, not even your reflection, but you, the one behind the eyes, the watcher behind the words, the center behind the swirl of experience. Yet neuroscience tells us something disquieting, that there is no center, no fixed self sitting in a control room of the brain. What exists instead is a network of activity, like wind chimes reacting to a breeze, electrical signals, emotions, memories, stories, each playing its tune. And together, they give rise to the illusion of a single being. But dig deeper, and you find no core, no puppet master, just process, just patterns, just awareness. Do you ever feel like you're just watching yourself live? One voice whispers to another in the dark, like a character in a book that someone else is writing. All the time, the other replies softly. But if I'm just a character, who's holding the pen? Maybe you are not one person, but a collection of roles, a childhood wound, a dream of success, a memory of your father's voice, the taste of coffee in the morning. And these moments, scattered and stitched together, form a self that is less like a statue and more like a flame, constantly changing, bright but without a solid center, Still, if there is no real you, what does that mean for suffering? Who hurts when grief arrives? Who laughs when joy spills over? Who trembles in love's embrace or crumbles under rejection? Perhaps it's not a single you, but rather the orchestra of being responding in harmony or dissonance. And what about dreams? Who dreams the dream when the lights of consciousness dim and you drift? Is it the same self that eats breakfast and reads the news? Or is it a deeper presence, more fluid, less name-bound, that dances in the half-light of sleep? There's a strange peace in not being fixed. Like water, you are shaped by the vessel you pour into. One day a parent, another a child, a lover, a thinker, a silent observer. You shift, you change, and yet somehow it still feels like you. Isn't that the most profound mystery of all? Float now. Let go of the idea that you must find yourself like a lost object. Maybe you were never lost. Maybe you were never one thing to begin with. Just a story, beautiful and brief, told at the edge of the void. Now drift gently, because the next question is even stranger. Can thoughts think themselves? Can thoughts think themselves? It begins like a whisper in a crowded room, a thought. You don't know where it came from. It was simply there, as if the mind were a river and you were just watching leaves glide across the surface. A soft voice speaks across a cafe table. Have you ever noticed your thoughts start running before you even wake up? The other smiles faintly, stirring their tea. I think they never stopped. I just rejoined the stream. We like to believe we are the ones doing the thinking, that we're driving this vehicle called mind. But most thoughts arise uninvited. They form themselves, fueled by memory, emotion, habit, and something deeper, older, perhaps unknowable. You don't summon your heartbeat. You don't instruct your lungs to breathe. The mind, too, has its own rhythm, its own weather. A commuter on the train leans back and wonders, was that me who thought that cruel thing, or just an echo of something I heard long ago? Maybe the truth is gentler than we feared. Maybe you are not your thoughts. Maybe you are the silence that hears them. Because thoughts, they happen, without consent, without instruction. They bloom, flicker, fade. Some are poetic, some intrusive, some comforting, others absurd. Yet all of them arise like mist off a lake at dawn, formless until observed. One thought, I'm not good enough. Another, I'll never make it. But who whispered those words? Were they born in you or planted long ago by someone else? Two friends walk beneath the amber glow of streetlights. Sometimes I wonder if my brain is just replaying old messages on shuffle. Maybe. Or maybe it's like an old radio, picking up frequencies you didn't choose. When you watch a bird fly across the sky, you don't chase it. You don't attach to it. You simply see it. That is how you can meet a thought, with presence, not panic. And in doing so, something gentle begins to unfold. You become the space that thought moves through, not the story it tells. A small child rests on a parent's lap, looking up at clouds. That one looks like a boat, and it'll change again soon. Thoughts are like that, fleeting, shape-shifting. They are not permanent structures, only visitors. You don't need to wrestle them. You don't even need to stop them. Just witness. Let them come. Let them pass. Some carry messages, some carry noise. All of them dissolve in the same quiet wind. You are not a prisoner of your thoughts. You are the quiet shore they wash upon. You are not the storm. You are the sky. So tonight, if a thought knocks too loudly on your window, don't fight it. Just listen. Smile gently. Let it pass. And as the wind settles, ask yourself softly, who is it that hears the thought? if not the thought itself? Let the question drift now. Let the answer take no shape. Only stillness remains. And just beneath that stillness, the next mystery waits. What lives in the silence between your thoughts? The voice behind silence. In the stillness between thoughts, something watches. Not a voice, not a word, not even a sensation, but a kind of gentle presence, like the hush that falls just after a bell stops ringing. That space, that awareness, is not an absence. It is not empty. It's more like the quiet presence of a witness, sitting at the center of your experience, untouched by the noise of your thoughts. Meditators speak of this state as if it were a doorway, not one you walk through, but one that opens inside you the moment you stop trying to get anywhere at all. Have you ever noticed it? Perhaps in the early hours of the morning, before the world wakes, or in the middle of the night, staring at the ceiling while your mind is too tired to speak. There, in that fragile silence, something feels alive. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't judge. It simply exists. Do you ever feel like someone's watching, but it's just you? Yeah, but not me. More like something quieter, something that doesn't need a name. Science might call this a default mode network going idle. Psychology might say it's the ego pausing. But that doesn't capture the intimacy of the experience. It's not just a system powering down. It's a return, an arrival to something older than language, older than memory. A calm, still mirror beneath the waves of thought. What's strange is how often we forget it, how quickly we run away from that inner silence. Maybe because we're conditioned to fill every moment with doing, thinking, fixing, planning. Maybe because silence makes us feel like we're losing something. But what if it's the opposite? What if silence is where the truest part of you lives, and the noise is what makes you forget? There's a strange comfort in the idea that underneath all our identities, all our emotions, all our stories, something constant remains. It watches without judging, listens without replying. Some call it awareness. Others call it soul. But whatever name we give it, its nature doesn't change. It doesn't speak. It just is. And that raises a haunting question. Is that quiet awareness the real you? If so, what does that make the rest of your life? A performance, a wandering away from home, a long echo trying to remember its original voice? I feel like I've been chasing answers for years, but maybe I was supposed to be listening. Maybe the answers don't talk. Maybe they wait. Let that idea settle like snow. The thought that maybe who you are isn't your name or your thoughts or your memories, but the one who has quietly witnessed it all, never once speaking, never once leaving. And if that's true, then silence is not loneliness. It's not emptiness. It's reunion. So tonight, as you lie there with the world softening into shadows, let yourself slip beneath the current of thought. Sink softly into that inner stillness. Let it hold you, not with hands, but with presence. Ahead, there is more to wonder about. What if you could be completely known and still never understood? But for now, just rest. In the silence behind the mind, where nothing needs to be said, because everything already is. The impossibility of being truly known. There is a moment just before sleep when your thoughts begin to untangle. A name drifts in, a face, a memory of saying something that didn't quite land. You wonder if they understood what you meant or only what you said. That's where we begin, in that soft place between connection and misinterpretation. Words are bridges, but fragile ones. You speak with care, maybe even with love. Yet the sentence is shaped by your voice, wrapped in your history, and launched into the world where it can never be caught as it was intended. The listener, too, is wrapped in their own weather. Memories, moods, a headache, a history. So what reaches them is not what left you, and yet we keep trying. Do you ever feel like no one really gets you? She asks, stirring her tea absent-mindedly. He smiles, eyes soft. All the time, but I don't blame them. Sometimes I don't even get myself. There's a kind of ache in being known, not because it's painful, but because it's always incomplete. You describe your favorite song, but no one hears it with your ears. You explain why you cried, but they weren't there for the 1,000 moments that made the tears inevitable. Even when someone listens closely, there's a space between you. Not distance, but mystery. And what a strange, sacred mystery it is. Like a sealed envelope tucked inside your chest that no one else can open. Not even those who love you. Especially not them. Sometimes it shows up in the little things. You laugh at a memory you can't explain. You change the subject because to explain would ruin the purity of the feeling. You say, "I'm fine," because the truth is too layered for a Tuesday conversation in an elevator. And in those moments, you are both a person and a universe. Visible, but not fully mapped. He leans back in his chair, watching the rain trail down the window. "Maybe that's the point," he says quietly. "To be known a little, and unknown enough to still be magic." She nods, resting her chin on her hands. "I think I'd be scared if someone saw everything. I don't even know what everything is yet." What we call loneliness is sometimes just the realization that no one can stand exactly where you're standing. But what if that's not tragic? What if it's the gentle cost of being a singular consciousness in a universe made of echoes? You're not a riddle to be solved. You're a garden that blooms differently under every gaze. A lighthouse whose beam only reaches certain shores. A language no one will ever speak fluently, not even you. And maybe that's okay, because in every failed explanation, in every misunderstood word, in every silence that holds too much, you're reminded that your inner world is real, lush, whole, and yours. Let that thought rest in your chest like a warm stone. Let it soften your breath. Let it blur the edge between speaking and simply being. Because next, we'll step toward the reflection that looks back without needing to understand. The stranger in the mirror. There's a quiet moment in many lives, unexpected and wordless, when you catch your own reflection and feel nothing. Not the usual automatic recognition, not the familiar flicker of self, but a subtle, eerie pause, as if the person staring back isn't entirely you. The lines are familiar, the tilt of the jaw, the quiet crease near the brow, but something deeper, a sense, feels disjointed, unattached, alien. Hey, have you ever looked in the mirror and felt like you're seeing a stranger? Yeah, once, after a long night. But it wasn't just exhaustion. It felt like I was borrowing this face. What do we really see in that mirror? Is it just skin, bone, and expression? Or is it the echo of a dozen past selves, layered like old film? Childhood laughter fossilized in the cheeks, grief sitting like shadow beneath the eyes, dreams not yet lived, shimmering in the pupils like distant stars. Perhaps the face we wear is a timeline, not a fixed identity, but a record in motion. You were once someone else, curious, hopeful, broken, growing. And tomorrow, you'll become yet another version, stitched together from today's decisions and forgotten regrets. The mirror doesn't always show who you are now. Sometimes it shows who you were trying to become, or worse, who you tried not to be. Do you think that version of me is still inside? Maybe, or maybe it's waiting for you to remember. Familiarity can lull us into blindness. You see your face every morning, combing your hair, brushing your teeth. You stop noticing the subtleties. But then, one evening, maybe after a hard day or a quiet triumph, you glance up and the mask slips. You see the gap between who you feel you are and who appears in that glass, the outsider within. That dissonance can be jarring. Is this really the body that carries your thoughts, your memories, your longings? The same one that once stood on playgrounds or danced without shame? Time wears us slowly, yet the mirror captures it all at once. And maybe that's why it shocks us, because we live from the inside out, but the mirror sees only surface. So who is it really? That stranger in the mirror? A past version, frozen mid-smile? A future self, blinking through the fog of years? Or just a shell, an interface your consciousness rents for the length of this strange, earthly journey? The mirror doesn't lie, but it doesn't tell the full truth either. It reveals the vessel, not the voyage. It reflects the shape of your face, not the storms you've survived or the love you've carried quietly like a candle in your chest. I looked again, just now, and it felt like he blinked a half second after me. Maybe he's catching up. Let the image blur. Let it melt into softness, like a dream slipping from memory. Because the next journey isn't through glass, but through symbols, whispers, and sleeping visions, where the self shapeshifts without resistance, and where the face no longer matters, because everything speaks in a language older than thought. We are about to enter the secret language of dreams. Drift softly. The mirror has closed behind you. The symbols that speak while you sleep. Have you ever woken from a dream and felt something deeper than confusion? Something sacred, like a whisper from a part of yourself you rarely visit? It wasn't in words. It didn't explain, but it lingered. A key without a door, a face without a name. That is the language of dreams. In the quiet hours of sleep, the mind loosens its grip on logic and slips into the hidden theater behind your waking thoughts. There, nothing speaks in sentences. Instead, the soul sketches in metaphor. A bird flying through glass, a staircase that never ends, a lover with no face. These are not nonsense. They're not random. They are the poetry of your unconscious, stitched from long-buried fears, secret longings, and quiet truths you've been too busy to hear. I dreamed of drowning again, someone might whisper into the morning light. Were you afraid? Comes the soft reply. No, I think I was relieved. Dreams bypass the censors of language. They leap straight into the bloodstream of emotion. In that submerged world, even silence has weight. The rain might carry your sorrow. The forest might speak of your past. A broken clock might be a wound that refuses to heal. These symbols are not assigned, they are felt. They arise not from a textbook of meanings, but from you, your life, your pain, your memory. And in that way, dreams are not fiction. They are maps, not of the world outside, but of the landscape within. The cave you dare not enter during the day might open wide at night. There, you might find the child you used to be, the version of you that still believes, still aches, still waits to be seen. I keep seeing my childhood home in my dreams. Someone confesses. Do you go inside? The door is always locked. Maybe it's not the house that's locked. Dreams invite you to return to the places you abandoned. They stir what you've buried beneath productivity, distraction, and noise. And they ask, gently, mysteriously, are you ready to listen? But listening to dreams requires a different kind of ear. Not the one that parses meaning like a puzzle, but the one that senses in color and taste and echo. It is the same ear that hears music in silence, that feels something shift when the wind moves a curtain, that knows, without knowing, that you are being called back. So the next time you wake with the image of falling teeth, a vanishing bridge, or a friend with glowing eyes, pause. Don't rush to interpret. Instead, feel what the symbol stirs. Let it sit beside you like an old companion. Ask it nothing, and see what comes. For the dream does not speak in your tongue. It speaks in the symbols you've forgotten how to name. And if you let them, they will guide you home. Stay with that image now. Let it fade, but not vanish. The next voice belongs to time itself, and it doesn't speak as we do. Time as a circle. There's something oddly familiar about certain moments. A scent drifting through the hallway. A phrase that lands in your ear as though you've already heard it. Months ago, or lifetimes. The world shifts just slightly, and for a second, you're sure you've been here before. In many ancient traditions, time is not a forward march but a slow spin. The past doesn't vanish. It returns, softly, rhythmically, like the seasons nudging the same flowers awake. The stars don't move toward some distant end. They wheel above us in quiet circles, generation after generation, whispering the same constellations to different eyes. In a late-night diner, two strangers reach for the same packet of sugar. Their hands touch. One of them chuckles. Déjà vu? Worse, I think I remember forgetting you. That's the loop, when a memory curls around itself and becomes a feeling. You don't always recall the specifics, but you feel it, like the weight of a conversation you've never had, or the ache of a goodbye that hasn't happened yet. Some say thought patterns repeat too. You worry in familiar shapes. You long in familiar ways. Even your dreams, those strange, drifting stories, sometimes pick up where they left off. Maybe you never escaped that one hallway. Maybe the faces just changed masks. A child once asked, "If my birthday comes every year, does that mean I'm walking in a circle?" And the father answered without looking up, "No. You're spiraling upward. Each loop lifts you higher if you notice what it's trying to show you." But what if we miss the lesson? What if this night is one of many, repeating until you remember something, not grand or cosmic, but small, warm, essential, like the kindness you forgot to give, or the part of yourself you left waiting at a younger age? Sometimes, a rhythm is a reminder. You take the same route home. You pass the same tree with the broken limb. And tonight, for some reason, you stop. You notice the limb is healing, a scar where the break was. Time looped, but something changed. And what if this entire life is a return? What if death is not a door, but a quiet curve? What if the moments you cherish most aren't linear at all, but woven, layered, folded over each other like a blanket you forgot you were wrapped in? A man on a bench watches the streetlights blink into life, one by one. He says softly to no one, "I think I was here before the lights came on." A woman walking by turns her head. "Do you remember what happened next?" He pauses. "Number, but this time, I'm staying a little longer." This is not nostalgia. It's not memory. It's the hum beneath time, the soft repetition that asks not for answers, but attention. Let it spin. Let the loop hold you, not to trap, but to cradle. If time is a circle, it isn't meant to cage you. It's meant to remind you gently, over and over, until something inside you finally softens. And so we drift. We let time curl like smoke into the next shape it chooses. Because coming next is not just another moment. It's the shared breath of the collective mind. The shared illusion of reality. Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine standing in a room with no objects, no mirrors, no clocks, no people. Now ask yourself, what time is it? What day is it? Does Tuesday still mean anything without a calendar or anyone else to confirm it? That's the strange beauty of shared reality. It's not something we find. It's something we agree upon. A silent handshake between billions of minds. We don't see the world as it is. We see the world as we've been taught to name it. A green piece of paper becomes money. A border on a map becomes a country. A spinning rock becomes Earth, and 24 rotating hours become a day. One evening, while watching the sunset, someone asked softly, "Isn't it funny how we all just believe in time?" Their friend smiled. "Yeah, it's like we made up a rule, then forgot we made it up." So much of what we call reality is held together by mutual consent. Language allows us to name, shape, and understand the world, but also to invent it. Without words like justice, beauty, or truth, would those things exist in any meaningful way? Maybe they're not discovered but declared. A child doesn't see race or money or social class. They see color, sound, movement, until we teach them what to notice, until we name it all for them. And suddenly, what was once fluid becomes solid. Reality congeals. But here's the question that lingers like the last light of dusk. What happens when we no longer agree? When enough people stop believing in the value of a currency, it collapses. When belief in a government fades, revolutions erupt. When a story we've told for centuries loses its grip, the structure it upheld begins to dissolve. In that sense, reality can be brittle, held up not by physics alone, but by the collective imagination. Two old friends once sat on a park bench, one of them turning a coin in his hand. "Crazy, right?" he murmured. "This is just metal, but people kill for it." The other shrugged. "Yeah, belief's the most expensive thing in the world." There's something both comforting and unsettling about this idea. If reality is built together, then it can be rebuilt. If it is agreed upon, then it can be renegotiated. The stories we inherit don't have to be the stories we continue. But this also means that when consensus breaks, so does the world we know. A quiet thought arises. Are we living in a moment where shared belief is crumbling? When no one agrees on truth, when facts feel optional and reality fractures into timelines, feeds, and filtered lenses. What then holds us together? In sleep, there are no borders, no currencies, no names. Just experience, just sensation. Maybe dreams remind us that underneath it all, reality is elastic, that the frame we call real is something our minds stretch into shape each day. So before you drift off, ask gently, what would happen if we all stopped agreeing on reality? Would the ground give way beneath us? Or would something truer take its place? Exhale slowly. That thought is delicate. Let it linger like morning mist. Because next, we step into an even deeper fog, the illusion of control. The control you never had. She sat across from him on the last train of the night, arms folded, eyes lost somewhere far from the dull, fluorescent hum. He asked quietly, Do you ever feel like you're steering the ship, but the ocean's already decided where you'll land? She smiled, not in mockery but in tired agreement. Every time I check the weather and still forget the umbrella. It's strange, isn't it? The way we grip the illusion of control like a child clutching the string of a balloon, fearing that letting go means losing everything, when in truth, the wind has always been doing most of the flying. You plan, you prepare, you push. Yet a stranger's decision, a random delay, a misfired neuron, can change the shape of your day or your whole life. You are not weak for being shaped by these forces. You are simply human, threaded into a larger fabric that resists being folded the way we want. There's a kind of quiet strength in recognizing the limits of your hands. You don't control the sunrise. You didn't schedule your first breath. So why exhaust yourself trying to choreograph the storm? Control is comforting, yes. It gives the brain structure. It gives the ego purpose. But peace? Peace often comes not when you've got a grip, but when you've softened it. Some nights, that's all we need. The permission to loosen the wheel, even if just a little. To drift, to float. To let life carry us for once instead of fighting the current. And yet, there's no resignation here. Surrender isn't defeat. It's cooperation with reality. It's the grace of saying, I'm still here, even if I'm not driving. In a corner cafe, two strangers once negotiated over a shared table. One offered half a smile and said, I didn't plan to be here, but here I am. The other nodded, already sliding their bag aside. Neither controlled the moment, but both shaped it into something soft, something simple, something kind. That's the paradox. When we stop pretending to control everything, we begin to see where our influence actually lives, in how we respond, in how we breathe through chaos, in how we make meaning, even when the script changes mid-scene. Maybe you were never meant to steer the storm, only to dance inside it without losing your rhythm. So tonight, as the thoughts quiet and your body softens beneath the weight of sleep, let this be enough. You don't need to control this moment. You only need to feel it. Let it pass like wind through the trees. Let go, not with fear, but with trust. And in that letting go, find rest. Next, we arrive at a riddle. When you know too much, can you still feel wonder? When knowledge becomes a cage. Have you ever noticed how the more you learn, the less you feel? How the words you once whispered in awe, moonlight, miracle, mystery, become terms you now define, dissect, or reduce. Knowledge, in its pursuit to bring clarity, sometimes casts a shadow of its own, like a lighthouse so bright it blinds the stars. Do you remember when the rain used to feel magical? She asked as they sat side by side, eyes fixed on the window pane. He nodded softly. Yeah. Now I check the forecast, measure humidity, and wonder if it'll flood the basement again. See? She smiled, half laughing. You learned too much. You forgot how to just get wet. Sometimes we build libraries in our minds, neatly arranged facts, bookmarked explanations, and logic stacked high like towers. We take pride in these mental constructs, but in doing so, we may lock ourselves out of wonder, out of raw, untamed experience. We no longer hear silence, we analyze decibels. We don't dance in joy, we calculate calories burned. Slowly, the vibrant chaos of life is pressed into diagrams, theories, and certainty, and the sacred becomes academic. Knowledge was meant to liberate, but when it becomes armor, we no longer touch the world, we touch our ideas about the world, and touch turns distant. Why do you think children laugh so easily? She asked. Because they don't know better? He replied, amused. Or maybe because they haven't learned to filter wonder through facts yet. He blinked. So you're saying I should forget? She leaned back, eyes closed. Number just loosen your grip. What if wisdom doesn't always live in what we know, but in what we can unlearn? What if the truest sight comes when we stop trying to name everything we see? Some truths aren't meant to be captured in sentences. They are meant to be lived in silence, or in song, or in moments when the wind brushes your cheek and you feel something you can't explain. And for once, you don't need to. Letting go of the need to understand isn't ignorance, it's trust, it's presence. It's stepping into a world where the moon doesn't have to be a rock in space. It can be a secret keeper. Where a stranger's smile doesn't have to be interpreted. It can simply be received. And where your own breath, rising and falling, doesn't have to be monitored. It can just be. Hey, he whispered, glancing at her as their train passed through tunnels of dark. Can I ask a question without needing an answer? She smiled in the stillness. Now you're starting to remember. Empty your cup. Let the tea steam rise and dissolve into the air. Not everything must be grasped. Some things must be allowed. The next question coming isn't for your mind to solve. It's for your heart to carry and your soul to live. Keep listening. You're not thinking your way into sleep. You're feeling your way home. The question that lives inside you. A hush falls across the night. The world softens. Your breath finds a rhythm not unlike the turning of a page. Slow, inevitable, tender. And there, between one breath and the next, a whisper lingers. It's not a thought, not a memory. It's older than either. Something you've carried quietly, faithfully, even when you didn't know it had a name. Have you noticed it? That single, silent question that has followed you since you were small, not as a voice, but as a sensation, a tug in the chest, a pull in the gut. It moves through your decisions, shaping them without force. Not all questions are meant to be answered. Some are meant to walk beside you. It's not the kind of question you say out loud in a job interview or over dinner with friends. It's the kind that sits with you when everything else goes quiet, the kind that stirs when a stranger's words strike too deep, or when you wake in the middle of the night without knowing why. Have you ever felt, she asked softly, like something's missing even when everything's right? He paused, stirring sugar into a lukewarm cup of tea. Yeah, he murmured, but I don't know what it is. Just that it matters. That's the nature of the inner question. It's not a riddle to be solved, but a compass. It doesn't offer direction, only orientation, pointing not to where you should go, but to who you are becoming. It might take the form of, am I truly loved? Or, what makes this life mine? Or something softer still like, is it safe to rest? Perhaps it lived in your longing to be understood, or in the moment you hesitated before speaking truth. Maybe it was loud when you left something behind, and louder still when you found something you hadn't meant to look for. There's no rush to name it. Sometimes naming strips things of their magic. Just notice it. That quiet vibration in the background of your being. Some people mistake it for anxiety. Others confuse it with curiosity. But it's neither. It's a rhythm. The bass line beneath your melody. One afternoon, a man sat quietly by a fountain in a crowded park. A child approached him, wide-eyed and curious. "What are you doing?" He smiled, not turning his gaze from the water. "Listening to the part of me that doesn't speak." If you've ever delayed a decision for reasons you couldn't quite explain, this question was there. If you've ever felt peace not from knowing, but from letting go of needing to know, this question was there. And if you're listening now, floating in the in-between of wake and sleep, it may be whispering again. Maybe your life hasn't been a chase for answers after all, but a dance with that question, a question that changes shape but never vanishes. One that waits patiently until you're quiet enough to hear it clearly, not as a demand, but as presence. And so, let it be a companion, not a burden. Don't force it into clarity. Let it flicker gently at the edge of your awareness, like a candle in a hallway you've never walked all the way down. The light is enough. You don't have to open every door. Let your breathing slow. Let your thoughts fade like footprints in soft sand. You are not here to resolve the unknown tonight. You are here to rest in its arms. Soon, we will move again, deeper into the realm where even the questions sleep. But for now, let this one stay. Let it guide you through the next dream. The end that begins again. In the quiet stillness of night, when even your thoughts begin to whisper instead of shout, a question floats in, weightless and slow. What if endings are not ends at all, but just pauses in a story that never truly stops? The mind pictures a book, pages fluttering gently, and somewhere within it, a corner is folded, not to mark a finish, but to signal a return. Do you think it all ends when we close our eyes for the last time? She asked softly, lying beside him beneath the dim starlight that filtered through the window blinds. I used to, he replied, voice hushed as if afraid to wake the silence. But lately, it feels more like turning a page, like there's something written on the other side we're not meant to read yet. Nature whispers this secret constantly, but so quietly that we forget to listen. Watch a leaf fall, not with sorrow, but with grace. It pirouettes in the air, touches the ground, and begins again. Not in the same form, no, but the leaf nourishes roots. Roots bring life. Life rises. And so, what looked like loss was simply renewal, spoken in a language deeper than words. Perhaps we fear endings not because they're final, but because they interrupt our illusion of control. We craft timelines, measure days, count moments, only to realize the story was never linear to begin with. In truth, everything swirls. A sigh becomes a silence becomes a seed. That seed, a thought, and from that thought, a beginning once more. I sometimes wonder, he murmured, if dying is like waking up from the longest dream, not scary, just surprising, like remembering who you were before all this started. She smiled without turning her head. And maybe that's why the stars don't weep when the sun sets. They know it's coming back, just not in the way it left. The thought lingers. If you believed, truly believed, that nothing vanishes, only transforms, would you still see goodbyes as grief? Or would they soften into quiet reverence, like a curtain falling on a scene that made you feel something real? This idea holds a strange peace, that even your final breath might be an inhale for something else. That death, that trembling horizon, is not a cliff, but a curve, a bend in the circle, a return not to where you began, but to what you've always been beneath the name, the face, the fleeting identity. So as your eyes begin to close and the world outside fades into that familiar blur, ask gently, what if this too is not an end? What if it's the softest door opening and the hush behind it is not silence, but the sound of something beginning? Now exhale. Let the breath go, not with fear, but with faith. For ahead, we slip into another mystery, where the self begins to dissolve and what remains. might be truer than anything you've ever claimed as you. The face beneath all faces. There comes a hush at night, not in the world outside, but in the theater within. It's when your roles retire, one by one. The friend who listened, the employee who performed, the partner who remembered to smile, even when tired. You take them off quietly, like layers of clothing after a long day. And what remains underneath stirs. Not everyone notices it at first. It doesn't arrive with trumpets, but with a silence so still. It startles. A presence that doesn't try to be anything, just is. Not defined by names, titles, or jobs. Just a witness. A breath that observes all the breathing. A stillness that remains, even when the thoughts dissolve. Did you ever feel like you're different people depending on who you're with? Yeah, like I'm trying on characters I didn't audition for. There's a certain melancholy to realizing how much of life is performance. Even kindness can be rehearsed. Even sorrow can be curated. And yet, in the dark, when no one's watching, you sometimes meet a face that feels older than the one you show to the world. Not aged in years, but ancient in knowing. A face that has nothing to prove and no story to sell. Is that your real face? Or is it just another role, more mysterious, but still wrapped in illusion? I looked in the mirror once, late at night, and I didn't recognize myself, not in a scary way, just unfamiliar. Like the reflection was tired of pretending? Exactly. And there lies the subtle paradox. Maybe we don't wear masks over our faces. Maybe we wear faces over our masks. Maybe everything we've called me is just a rotating gallery of expressions, crafted for each room we enter, each person we meet. But who's curating that gallery? When you're alone, really alone, in that stretch of time where the house is asleep and the phone has stopped buzzing, there's a sense that someone is watching behind your eyes, not judging, not naming, just noticing. You feel like an open doorway rather than a locked identity. This isn't frightening, it's freeing. Because if you are not only what you appear to be, then you're also not trapped by it. You can be kind without being the kind one. You can rest without being lazy. You can grieve without needing to label it as weakness or strength. And still, the question floats in the quiet. Is that bare presence the real you? Or is it simply the final costume, so convincing it no longer feels like one? The answer doesn't press. It's content to hover near sleep, like fog near a lake. Let the tension leave your shoulders. Let the image of who you were today dissolve like chalk in the rain. A new face will rise with morning, but for now, let the one beneath all faces rest. Because what comes next asks whether there is a you at all, or only the dream of one. And maybe, as you exhale, it's okay not to know. The myth of a solid self. You do not end where your skin stops, nor are you a name that can hold you still. You are not a statue in a museum of consciousness. You are motion, unfolding moment by moment, like wind across water. The idea of a solid self, something permanent, fixed, and unchanging, is a comfort we carry like a childhood blanket. But what if that comfort is built on illusion? In Buddhist thought, the self is not a noun, but a verb. You are not someone. You are something happening. A stream, not a rock. A flicker, not a flame held in place. Each breath shifts you. Every blink brings a new you. We don't notice it because it happens so gently. But even in sleep, your cells are dividing. Thoughts are fading. Dreams are growing and dissolving. Who, then, is dreaming? Do you ever feel like you're the same person you were 10 years ago? One voice asks softly in the dim room. The other smiles, eyes barely open. I don't even feel like the same person I was this morning. They both laugh, not loudly, but as if sharing a secret the world forgot. If the self is a river, then why do we fear letting go of the rocks? Maybe because we believe they anchor us. But what if they only weigh us down? We say, I, as if it points to a single lighthouse in the dark. But the light is always flickering, the structure always weathering. I am angry, I am tired, I am loved. Yet the feelings vanish, and still we keep speaking of this I as though it stays the same through every wave. But what if it's just a word we use to gather the fragments? When you say I, who exactly is speaking? The child version of you who once believed in monsters under the bed? The version that loved someone who is now a stranger? Or the you that will rise tomorrow with different thoughts, different aches, different dreams? I sometimes think I'm made of stories, the first voice whispers. Then maybe we're just libraries pretending to be people, the second one replies, half asleep. And in that quiet exchange, a profound truth floats. If we're not fixed, if we are ever changing, then sleep isn't an escape. It's a soft rehearsal for the next version of us. A gentle pause in the dance of becoming. The comfort you seek tonight may not come from clinging to who you were. It may come from surrendering to who you're becoming. Let go of the rigid shape. Feel yourself ripple. Because next, we step into the dreamlike distortions of memory, the very place where the past begins to blur. False memories, true feelings. Have you ever felt something deeply, then realized it never really happened? A place you swear you've been, a conversation that never took place, a face so familiar yet unnamed. Still, your heart responds, not to the truth of it, but to the emotional shape it left behind. Our minds are not perfect recorders. They're poets, stitching fragments into meaning. Sometimes they invent scenes to explain a feeling. They loop music that never played. They cast shadows in a memory's corner just so something fits. But just because it didn't happen doesn't mean it didn't shape us. And here's the strange beauty. Even lies we never meant to tell ourselves can leave fingerprints on who we become. A woman once told me she cried for weeks over a breakup that never happened. It was just a dream, she whispered. But I missed him, like we'd lived a whole life. Her therapist gently replied, then maybe you did, just in a different theater. A man at a bus stop once turned to me and said, sometimes I think my childhood was happier than it was. Is that wrong? I prefer the version I made up. He chuckled, almost embarrassed, then added, it's softer to hold. We want truth. We crave it. But often, what endures isn't the event. It's the echo. You don't carry the facts. You carry the ache, the warmth, the wish. Think of how many arguments you've replayed in your mind. Now ask, did they happen exactly like that? Or did you sharpen them with hindsight? Color them with frustration? Make them louder than they were? And still, they left a mark. Still, they shaped how you step into rooms with that person now. And maybe that's the quiet lesson here. The mind does not distinguish well between a story lived and a story believed. It imprints what feels real, not what was real. So what then of our identities? Are we walking collages of fictions, fragments, forgotten truths? If I believe I was loved, even when I wasn't, will my chest still soften at the memory? And if I believe I was hurt, even if no harm was intended, will my shoulders still tense each time? A quiet thought. Maybe we're not made of stone. Maybe we're made of fog. And in that fog, Shapes dance, some imagined, some lived, but all real in how they shape our steps. If you've ever woken up grieving someone you never knew, or smiling at a childhood that wasn't quite yours, you're not broken. You're human. You're tender. You're built for stories, even the ones no one else can see. Let yourself rest inside that knowing. Feel the warmth of a memory, true or false, settle in your chest, not as proof, but as presence. And as it fades, like breath against a mirror, follow it. We're about to enter a place where the border between memory and imagination begins to blur, and what we remember may no longer matter more than what we feel. Close your eyes if they haven't closed already. Let's begin. Echoes from imagined futures. It's strange, isn't it? How you can feel heartbreak over something that never actually happened. No photos, no memories, not even a beginning. And yet, it hurts. Maybe it was the version of you who said yes to that distant city, or the love story that lived only in glances, never spoken aloud, or the child you never met, but somehow dreamed of on quiet nights. These imagined lives linger like ghosts, not haunting us with fear, but with tenderness, soft echoes of parallel selves who might have been. The mind does something extraordinary. It builds entire lifetimes from a glance, a possibility, a whisper of what if. These lives never come to pass, but they shape the landscape of who you are. You mourn the loss of that book you never wrote, that house you never built by the sea, that person you almost became. And in that mourning, something quietly profound is revealed. Your capacity to love something that never existed is perhaps the purest proof that your heart is real. Do you think people know they're grieving a fantasy? She asks as they sit beneath the hum of a street lamp, the world outside dimming into sleep. He sips his coffee and nods, eyes distant. Sometimes, I think we only realize it when we hear the echo, when the silence we expected to be full isn't. She leans back, thoughtful. I used to picture myself as a painter in Lisbon. Every time I smell turpentine, it breaks my heart a little. He smiles gently. That means you lived it somewhere. Maybe not here, but inside. And isn't that just as real in its own way? So many futures bloom and fade within us. Some live as quiet joys, others ache like unspoken goodbyes. Yet all of them prove just how endlessly creative the mind is, how it writes and rewrites your personal mythology each time you stare out the window or fall asleep with a forgotten song playing. But here's the tender paradox. If you can love a life that never was, then maybe you can forgive the life that is. You don't need to be the painter in Lisbon, or the parent you imagined, or the explorer of dreams left untouched. You only need to be here, breathing, remembering that the ache itself is evidence of imagination's devotion. So, as you lie back and let the ache soften into a whisper, remember, no life imagined is ever truly wasted. Each one left its fingerprint on the soul you carry now. And as we drift, the next question emerges from the haze. What if you're living someone else's dream, and not your own? The wrong life. There are moments, rare but unmistakable, when a person stops mid-step, not out of exhaustion, but recognition, noticing the shoes on their feet and realizing they've never liked that color, or standing in a room full of laughter and suddenly feeling like a guest in their own life. Not because it's all wrong, necessarily, but because somewhere along the way, the melody changed, and you kept dancing out of habit. You may not remember when you started saying yes to things you didn't want, A job that made sense. A relationship that looked good on paper. A city that promised opportunity. And slowly, like soft sand under a tide, the shape of who you were began to smooth out. Until one day, you noticed, the edges are gone. Have you ever felt like that? One voice asks quietly. The other shrugs, then replies, I think I've spent more time being who I should be than who I am. A pause, then laughter, not bitter, but tired. Maybe that's why I'm always exhausted. I've been carrying someone else's life. It's not failure to notice, it's honesty. And honesty, even in whispers, is movement. There's a strange relief in confronting this, like catching yourself walking in the wrong direction and laughing, not panicking. Because at least now you know. Even if you're far from the place your soul once pointed toward, there's still time to turn around. Still air to breathe differently. Still silence waiting for your real voice to return. You might wonder, is the ladder too high now? Have I gone too far to descend? But maybe it's not about going back. Maybe it's about moving differently from here. Because perhaps the quiet voice that once said, "This is who I am," hasn't disappeared. Maybe it's just been waiting, buried beneath the noise of being good, useful, needed. You hear it in small acts. Asking a stranger for directions, not because you're lost, but because you're ready to stop pretending you know where you're going. Choosing a slower checkout lane just to speak to the cashier who smiles like they mean it. Taking off your shoes at the park and remembering how grass used to feel. Sometimes the first step isn't leaving. It's pausing. Listening for the voice that still knows you, even after all this time. And sometimes, the most radical act is not to push forward, but to step sideways. So if you feel like you've built a life on a story that isn't quite yours, don't panic. Don't grieve too loudly just yet. The soul has a strange way of circling back. Let yourself turn inward. The next question waits where stillness breathes louder than noise. The noise you carry inside. There's a strange moment just before sleep, when the world grows still and all the outside sounds begin to dim. But instead of peace, something else surfaces. A buzzing, not from the world, but from within. It isn't your phone or the television. It's your thoughts, your inner commentary, the looping monologue of what you said, what you didn't say, what might go wrong tomorrow, and what already has. It's the traffic jam of worries, regrets, imagined conversations, and background hums of unprocessed emotions. This is the noise you carry inside. In a world addicted to sound, music in your ears, voices on the screen, messages blinking at all hours, silence becomes foreign, unnatural even. But what if that very silence is the only place where truth lives? Most of us are not scared of silence because it's empty. We're scared of it because it's full of ourselves, of the unfiltered self we spend our days running from. When all distractions are stripped away, what do you hear? "I couldn't sleep last night," one voice says in the dark. "The quiet was too loud." And the other responds, "I know." It's like the silence has teeth. It bites. There's a curious kind of fear in being alone with your own mind. You begin to notice things. A memory you buried. A hope you pretend not to want. A fear you dressed up as ambition. The mind, unguarded, begins to echo, and not all the echoes are kind. That is the paradox. We crave peace, yet when it arrives, we reach for more noise. We long to hear our own hearts, yet flinch at their honesty. But something begins to shift when you sit with it, when you allow the noise to rise, not to fight it, not to judge it, just to notice it. Like waves on a shore, the thoughts come, and if you don't try to stop them, They eventually roll back, one by one, until there is stillness. Do you think it ever stops? The first voice asks. Not all at once, the second answers. But maybe it softens. The noise inside doesn't disappear by force. It dissolves by attention, by patience, by breathing into it rather than running from it. Beneath that swirl of mental weather lies a sky untouched. And if you wait long enough, the clouds part. Not forever, but just long enough for you to remember that silence was never empty. It was always alive, waiting for you to listen. So let the quiet surround you now. Don't rush to fill it. Don't distract. Just be here, in this strange, sacred space between thoughts. Because the next place we go is deeper still, into a paradox where silence doesn't end the story. It begins it. The voice that isn't yours. The mind, ever so softly, begins its nightly murmur. But as you lie there, the words that drift through your head, are they really yours? That phrase you heard earlier, that judgment you whispered to yourself without thinking, that rule you obeyed without asking why. These inner voices, so familiar, so persuasive, are often only echoes from somewhere else. There's a certain weight to them, isn't there? Like a coat you've worn for so long you forgot it wasn't yours to begin with. Maybe it belonged to a teacher who once told you to sit still and stop dreaming, or a parent's sigh when you dared to try, or even a stranger on the street who stared just a little too long. These voices don't always shout. Sometimes they whisper, just enough to shape a decision, curve a desire, delay a dream. You ever feel like you're arguing with someone inside your own head? A man once asked in a dim cafe, eyes darting toward the window like he expected someone to answer, only to realize you've never actually met them. His friend, stirring her tea slowly, smiled. Maybe we're just haunted by advice we never questioned. And what a haunting it is. The kind that doesn't rattle chains, but repeats itself at the quietest moments. When you hesitate before speaking, when you step back from the edge of change, when you choose comfort over authenticity. It can feel like intuition, but sometimes it's just conditioning in disguise. If your thoughts are borrowed, then who's living your life? If the words in your head were planted, rehearsed, recycled, then what's underneath them? There's something curious that happens when you sit long enough in stillness. The chatter dims, the arguments fade, and in their place, something deeper hums. Not quite a voice, not quite a silence, a presence, one that doesn't need words to be understood. That's where honesty might live. Not in the sentences you've memorized, but in the breath you didn't explain. You know what's strange? She whispered once as they waited for the train. I stopped journaling for a while, and the thoughts became quieter. Not gone, just gentler, like they didn't have to prove anything anymore. He nodded, watching the headlights approach in the dark. Maybe that's what real thinking feels like, when it's finally your own. And perhaps, when you release the need to narrate, you begin to hear the raw truth beneath it all. Not the borrowed beliefs, not the voices of past doubts dressed as your own logic, but the soft knowing that needs no explanation. That voice, it doesn't speak in language. It moves more like water. It feels like warmth. So as you rest now, you don't need to correct the noise. Just notice it, watch it go by, like clouds drifting past a moon too old to argue. Let the thoughts pass without holding them. You are not required to reply. You were never meant to carry so many voices. Let them go. Let them fall into the quiet and float softly with me now, as we ask what makes something real. What is real enough? In the quiet folds of twilight, a question ripples softly across your thoughts. What is real enough to matter? The world outside insists on proof. We are taught to believe in things we can hold, measure, quantify. But what about the things that move us without ever touching us? A story that stirs your chest like a wave. A dream that wakes you with a racing pulse. An imagined goodbye that heals more than the one you never got in real life. These things aren't real, not in the way a table or a thunderstorm is real, but they shape you nonetheless. Do you think that counts as real? She asks, her voice half draped in sleep. He turns slightly toward her, blinking at the ceiling. What does? A thought? A dream? Yeah. Or a memory that didn't actually happen, but still made you cry. He exhales slowly. Then maybe reality is just whatever leaves a mark. There's a tenderness in that idea, that something doesn't have to exist in the material world to change the course of your inner one. Maybe we've lived entire lives in the silence between real moments. Maybe the story you imagined about who you could have been matters just as much as the one you actually became. And what about those late-night conversations in your head? The ones where you say everything right this time. The ones where the people you lost answer back. No witnesses, no recordings. Yet somehow, those invisible dialogues rearranged the furniture in your soul. If you felt it, if it reshaped you, then who decides its worth? The universe? Your peers? Or just your heart? He whispers again, this time more slowly. I think I've had 100 lifetimes just lying here, all in my head. She smiles faintly. And some of them were better than the real one. Some of them were the real one. And maybe that's the secret we've all quietly agreed not to speak aloud. That the boundary between imagination and reality isn't a wall. It's a curtain, thin, shifting, sometimes glowing with the light of things we've never touched but always known. So the next time you question whether it was all just in your head, ask yourself instead, did it leave something behind? Did it make you softer, wiser, more awake? Because if it did, then perhaps, just perhaps, it was real enough. Now let your breath ease. Let the many lives you've held flicker gently in the background. We're drifting now toward a final inquiry. In all these worlds, were you ever truly alone? The illusion of separation. Somewhere between your last breath and the next, there is no line, no clear boundary. No hard edge that says, here is where you stop and the world begins. You may feel separate, your skin like the final wall between you and everything else. But in truth, the molecules that hum inside you once lived in oceans, forests, and the quiet lungs of strangers long gone. You are not a self-contained thing. You are a ripple, a temporary arrangement of matter echoing across time. Two people sit on a bench in silence. A leaf tumbles down between them, brushing one shoe and then the other. One speaks without looking. You ever get the feeling that nothing's really yours? The other smiles faintly. Maybe that's the point. Everything is borrowed. Even us. It's a strange comfort, isn't it? That your breath might hold a memory of a distant fire. That the calcium in your bones was once part of a mountain. That even your tears are just salted echoes of the sea. It means you've never really been alone, even when it felt like it. It means your pain and joy are stitched from the same cloth that wraps the world. It means the whisper in your chest, the one that murmurs, I belong, isn't lying. You've heard people say, we're all connected. But that's not just kindness. It's physics. It's biology. It's the stubborn refusal of atoms to remain in one place for long. What was once a drop of rain becomes blood. What was once a tree becomes breath. What was once someone's last exhale becomes your first morning yawn. If your cells are mosaics of everything that ever lived, how can you speak of others as if they're not also you? A woman stands at the crosswalk, hand lightly brushing the post. A man beside her fumbles with his phone. They don't speak, don't exchange glances, but they inhale the same winter air. Their coats flicker in the same wind. For one heartbeat, their hearts beat together. He says, barely audibly, "Feels like we're all moving alone." She replies, "Maybe we're just forgetting how to move together." You are not just connected, you are connective. Every word you speak, every kindness you give, every silent presence you offer, weaves into the fabric that others wrap around their loneliness. You're not behind a glass wall, you're water in water. And the illusion of separation? Just a trick of the surface. Soften now. Let that barrier melt. Let the thought of mine loosen its grip. The next time you hold your breath, remember, it's not really yours. It never was, but it always was you. The world doesn't end at your fingertips. It flows through them. Now let the edges blur gently, and let the next mystery open like a door in the dark, already ajar. The whisper of forgotten knowledge. Sometimes you hear something, just a phrase, a sentence, a tone, and it stirs something deep in you, not in the mind, but beneath it. A quiet jolt, a soft ache. You can't place it, yet it feels like something you once knew. It doesn't teach you something new. It reminds you of something ancient, not from books, not from anyone's mouth, something older than memory, standing in a room and suddenly sensing the scent of childhood. You turn, expecting someone to explain it, but there's no one there, just the sensation. That's what forgotten knowledge feels like. A kind of déjà vu, but for meaning. It brushes against your consciousness and then disappears, like a dream dissolving upon waking. You're left with a residue of truth, but no language to hold it. "Have you ever felt," she asked, her voice low in the dark, "like you knew something before you ever learned it?" He nodded, silent for a moment. "Sometimes I hear a thought in my head and it feels older than me. Exactly, like it was waiting there, waiting to be remembered." Perhaps wisdom isn't something we gain, it's something we uncover, like pulling back layers of dust from a sculpture that was always there. Maybe we came into this world knowing more than we were allowed to keep. And to survive here, we agreed, perhaps not aloud, but deeply, to forget certain things, to focus only on what the eyes can see and the ears can hear, to play by the rules of the visible world. But every now and then, that veil slips, and we glimpse it, a truth not written, not spoken, not taught, just felt, like the faint vibration of a bell you don't remember ringing. What if the deepest knowledge lives not in the mind, but in the marrow? What if we are not students of life, but amnesiacs slowly waking up? You're not broken, you're not behind, you're just remembering. Slowly, carefully, in the rhythm that your soul can handle. And when that moment arrives, that brief flash of insight that feels both alien and familiar, don't chase it. Let it pass through you, like wind through a curtain. Trust that your soul has recorded what your mind cannot yet process. Sometimes forgetting isn't a flaw, it's a form of protection. And remembering isn't always a task. It's a reunion. So when silence settles and the world becomes still, listen, not with your ears, but with your being. There may be something ancient knocking softly from within, hoping you'll recognize it without needing to name it. Let that whisper rest. Let it echo in the space between your thoughts. Let it lull you gently, because what comes next isn't about remembering the past. It's about experiencing the flow of time from within, not from the ticking of the clock. The clock within. You feel it before you see it, not the ticking of the clock on the wall, but something deeper, quieter, a rhythm that isn't measured by seconds but by sensation. The inhale before a thought, the stillness before a tear, the peace that visits without a name. Inside every person is a clock that doesn't obey numbers. It hums in your chest. It waits behind your ribs. It whispers not of time, but of timing. When to let go, when to pause, when to simply be. A woman in a crowded cafe glances at her watch, sighs, then puts it away. Across from her, a man stirs his tea slowly, speaking like he's unwrapping something fragile. Ever notice, he asks, how birds never seem late, even when they fly alone? She smiles. Maybe that's because they're not flying to anything, just with everything. In the background, the hum of life continues. Forks clink. A child's laughter rises and fades. Somewhere a train departs, but none of it hurries them. And in that space, where no one's racing, the moment stretches, not endlessly, but richly. We often forget we're made of rhythms, not deadlines, not schedules. Rhythms. The body doesn't care what day it is. It cares whether you're tired. It doesn't ask what you've achieved. It asks if your breath has reached the bottom of your lungs today. What if you trusted it more? That quiet timing that tells you when to speak and when to stay silent, when to chase, when to fold your wings. Would your sleep come easier, knowing you don't have to earn it? That rest isn't a reward, it's your right. You might notice it tonight. In the way your eyes start to soften, not from exhaustion, but from return, as if your body is guiding you back to something you've always known, but often ignored. Not a finish line, a hearth, a home. A boy sits in his room, scrolling endlessly through glowing rectangles. His grandmother walks past and turns off the light. You're missing the part of the night that breathes, she says. He frowns. The what? But her answer is just a slow breath and a smile that feels older than sleep itself. We're not wired for 24/7 anything. Not joy, not work, not even grief. The pulse inside us rises and falls like waves on the shore. Rest, effort, stillness, action. Trying to override it is like shouting into the wind and hoping silence will answer back. Let that sink in. You're not behind. You're not early. You are exactly where your rhythm placed you, and that is enough. Feel it now, the subtle loosening, the slowing that doesn't beg or push, it invites. One breath, one beat, one tiny return to self. And if your mind wanders, let it. That's just another rhythm. Sleep will come when it knows the timing is kind. The world outside may demand. But in here, in this gentle quiet, only one clock matters. And it doesn't tick. It hums. Now, rest into that hum. The next question waits between breaths. Breathing without thinking. There's something deeply humbling about the fact that your breath continues even when you forget it. No reminder needed, no effort. It just happens. The rise and fall of your chest is not a command you give. It is a quiet promise your body keeps. All day, all night, in the background, in the silence. Even when your thoughts are racing miles away, breath is the one companion that never leaves your side. I never think about breathing, she whispered once. eyes half closed in the passenger seat during a long, sleepy drive. He glanced over, amused. Wouldn't it be scary if we had to remember every time? She smiled. We'd forget. We'd probably die while daydreaming. Or worrying, he added. That'd be a weird way to go. But maybe that's the strange gift of life. It keeps going even when you're lost in thought. Your body, in its ancient wisdom, doesn't wait for you to be present. It moves. It heals. It beats and breathes. Not because you asked, but because you are. So what else in your life is like this? What other parts of your being operate without conscious direction? Could it be that the best parts of you, the intuitive kindness, the spontaneous laughter, the tears that rise uninvited, aren't controlled but simply allowed? Perhaps you are less the captain of the ship and more the ocean it sails, not the one steering, but the tide moving everything quietly forward. What if your role is not to micromanage life, but to trust that life is breathing through you? There's a kind of peace in surrendering that idea, that maybe your existence isn't something you must constantly control. Maybe you are not here to push, to strain, to dominate every second. Maybe your presence, your real, felt, living presence, is enough to keep the tide flowing. Just like your lungs know exactly what to do, your soul might too. He asked her once, "Do you think the heart knows more than the mind?" She thought for a moment. "I think the heart remembers what the mind tries to prove." "And the breath?" "That's the heart's lullaby," she murmured, "the only rhythm that never lies." As you lie still now, maybe there's nothing more important than remembering this. Your breath is not just oxygen. It's a signal, a message from life itself, gently saying, "You are still here, even when you're not trying, even when you're tired, even when you've forgotten yourself." So let the breath take over for a while. Let it carry you. You've done enough thinking today. You've asked the hard questions, held the heavy feelings. Now is the time to be breathed, to be held by something older than thought. Because next, we drift into an even deeper mystery, the idea that life itself might be dreaming you. You are being lived. A stillness enters before the thought arrives, not silence, but a presence, like the hush that precedes a great wave. And in that space, there's a question that doesn't shout. It simply hums beneath everything you've ever called you. What if life isn't something you live, but something that lives you? It's an old idea, older than memory. Across spiritual traditions, from the quiet sages of the Himalayas to mystics whose names are lost in desert winds, there's this whisper: you are not the doer. You are the danced, not the dancer, not the wind, but the reed through which breath passes. You might feel this when you fall into rhythm, writing without thinking, walking without aim, laughing before your mind catches up. In these moments, your will steps aside and something deeper flows in, something unplanned, yet strangely familiar. Was that me? One voice asks. I don't know, the other replies. But it felt right, like the moment chose itself. Sometimes it shows up in strange ways. You reach for a book, not knowing why. Later, you realize it held exactly the sentence your heart had been searching for. Or you take the longer path home and avoid the accident that never happened to you. Even your breath participates in this mystery. It rises and falls, not by command, but by invitation. No need to script each inhale. It simply happens, like tides obeying a moon they never see. And maybe, just maybe, you're like that too. An unfolding, a gesture made of skin and memory, directed by something that neither begins nor ends where your name does. This doesn't mean you're powerless. It means power is moving through you differently than you thought. You are not the driver holding the wheel. You are the road unfolding beneath the tires. And if you stop grasping for control, you might feel more carried than lost. It's strange how the ego resists this. We want ownership. We crave authorship. But what if the truest kind of freedom isn't in controlling the story, but in surrendering to the storyteller? A man once said to a stranger, "I don't know why I'm here. I just followed the scent of something real." The stranger smiled without question and pointed to the seat beside him. "Then sit. Whatever brought you knows the way better than either of us." And isn't that a kind of miracle? That life knows how to live you, even when you forget how to live yourself. Let go of the reins. Let the river carry you, not because you've given up, but because you've finally remembered you were never paddling alone. Now let that idea cradle you gently. Let it rock you the way a lullaby holds a child too tired to explain their sadness. The next breath you take, don't claim it, just receive it. Because next, we drift into a quieter place, not beyond thought, but beneath it. The space before the thought. There's something sacred in that sliver of stillness before the mind speaks. A space so delicate, so easily missed, it might as well be made of light. It isn't silence in the way we often define it. It's not the absence of sound or the quiet after noise. It's a shimmer, a breath not yet breathed. A place so fine, it slips through awareness like a breeze between your fingers. Some call it the gap. Others don't call it anything, because the moment you name it, you've already stepped past it. But you've felt it, haven't you? That faint sensation when you're on the edge of thinking, but haven't yet fallen in. The pause before a word is formed. The hush before meaning begins. It's not nothing. It's not void. It's presence, raw, untouched, and infinite. Do you ever feel it? She asks softly, her head resting on her pillow, eyes barely open in the dark. The what? He replies, blinking toward the ceiling. That stillness before a thought, right before your mind fills in the sentence. He's quiet for a moment, searching for it. Then he nods slowly. It's like a doorway, but if you look at it too hard, it vanishes. They lie still, letting the silence between them stretch, strangely full, humming with invisible weight. What if that is who you really are? Not the thoughts that come and go, not the commentary, the chatter, the stories, but the openness that lets all those things arise. The blank canvas, not the painting. The sky, not the weather. When we mistake ourselves for our thoughts, we get caught in the winds of judgment, fear, and identity. But when we notice the space those thoughts bloom from, we begin to remember something deeper, something quieter. Could your true self be this openness? The container, not the content? And if that's true, then what does it mean to live from that space? What happens when you stop identifying with what appears in the mind and instead rest as the clarity behind it? It's strange, he whispers after a while. The more I focus on it, the less I feel like me, but not in a bad way, more like I'm home. She smiles in the dark. Maybe that's what the real you feels like. This is not about escaping thoughts. It's about realizing they are guests in a much vaster home, and you, whoever you think you are, may be closer to that spaciousness than any of the words running through your head. That space before the thought is not empty. It's alive. And maybe, just maybe, that aliveness is who you've been all along. So now, as the room quiets and your breath slows, let yourself drift, not into sleep just yet, but into that soft, golden stillness, that brief breath of eternity that lives before every idea. It doesn't need to be grasped, just noticed, just felt. The next question waits beyond the edge of language, and it cannot be described, only experienced, only entered through the same door you've just touched, the space before the thought. The unnameable. There are things that slip past the teeth of language, moments that land in your chest instead of your head. The way a stranger brushes your shoulder in a crowd and something ancient stirs. The heaviness behind a smile you gave when you were anything but okay. Or the warmth in your throat when you hear a song from childhood that no longer belongs to you, but still holds you like home. Somewhere, between presence and memory, there's a flavor of truth that can't be poured into syllables. Not because words are lazy, but because words are borders and some experiences are oceans. Two friends sit on a balcony at midnight, listening to the hum of a far-off city. One of them speaks. You ever feel something so real, you can't say it out loud? The other doesn't reply, just nods slowly. That silence, shared, accepted, says everything. We name things to hold them, to pin butterflies with neat little labels. But there are feelings that flinch under the microscope. You can't dissect awe. You can't alphabetize the sting of longing or the grace and forgiveness. And still, we try. We say, I love you, as if those 3 words could ever carry the thunder of what we mean, as if grief could ever be flattened into, I miss them. And maybe we lose something in that translation. Because in naming, we often reduce. A galaxy becomes a star system. A heartbreak becomes just a breakup. A spiritual shiver becomes goosebumps. A barista hands over a cup and lingers for a second longer than usual. The customer, noticing, says with a soft chuckle, thanks for more than just the coffee. And no one explains what that means. Yet both feel the pulse of something real pass between them. Wordless. Whole. In therapy, there's often a moment when someone says, I don't even know how to talk about this. And that's when something real starts. That's when the body knows before the tongue does. A truth rising, ancient and raw, waiting for silence to be its stage. Because silence sometimes carries more honesty than explanation ever could. Even in sleep, you don't think your dreams. You drift into scenes made of symbols, sensations, textures of truth too subtle for language. You don't need to narrate the dream to feel its meaning. You wake with its imprint on your skin, in your breath, behind your ribs. A little girl once whispered to her grandfather while watching stars. They're not talking, but I still hear them. He smiled and nodded, not needing to reply. She had understood something most adults forget. That realness isn't always loud. So, what are we missing by always needing to explain? How many sunsets do we ruin by photographing them instead of feeling them? How many tender truths go unnoticed because they don't come with a caption? Let that question sit in your bones tonight. Let the words soften. Let the need to name dissolve. And follow me now, gently, as we step into the silence itself, where names vanish and being begins. The birthplace of silence. Where does silence come from? It's a question that rarely knocks loudly. It arrives like a hush at the edge of a thought, like mist at the edge of dawn. We often think of silence as what remains when everything else disappears. The absence of chatter, the stillness after a storm, the quiet between heartbeats. But what if that's not quite true? What if silence isn't what's left behind, but what was always there, patient, waiting beneath the noise? Silence may not be a lack, but a presence, like the blank page before a poem or the canvas before color. It holds possibility, not nothingness, and maybe, just maybe, it listens more than it hides. Two people sit beside each other on a dim balcony, the hum of the world soft in the background. "Do you hear that?" one asks, glancing up at the stars. "Hear what?" The other replies. "That? Nothing. But it doesn't feel like nothing. It feels like something's here, like the night itself is listening." Maybe it is. Maybe silence is how the world listens to us. In this space, it becomes harder to believe silence is just a gap between words. It feels more like a language we've forgotten how to speak. A form of communication so primal, so intimate, that it can only be felt rather than described. Silence doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Its presence presses gently against the edges of awareness, like a hand resting on your shoulder in the dark. Steady, reassuring, real. Think of the times when silence spoke loudest to you. Standing at the edge of the ocean, no words in sight, just the pulse of the waves and something larger echoing inside. Or when you sat across from someone you loved and nothing needed to be said because everything already was. That silence wasn't empty. It was full. It was sacred. It was complete. And maybe that's why we fear silence. Not because it offers nothing, but because it offers everything, without decoration, without distraction. It's in silence that we meet ourselves most honestly. It's in silence that our soul leans forward, hoping we'll finally listen. Do you think silence has a shape? The first person whispers again. The second closes their eyes. Not a shape, a weight, like memory, or longing, or peace. It's a poetic thought, but not merely metaphor. Neuroscience even suggests that silence isn't passive. It activates parts of the brain responsible for reflection, creativity, and awareness. Silence reshapes the way we process time. It allows the mind to wander, to stitch new thoughts from invisible threads. It's not a pause, it's a birth. So where does silence come from? Maybe it's born where noise ends, yes, but more truthfully, it's born where attention deepens. It arises not from the absence of sound, but from the presence of listening. Listening not just with the ears, but with the heart, the body, the breath. When everything slows down enough to notice, silence is already there, waiting. And when we allow ourselves to truly meet it, we might hear something new, not from the outside world, but from within, from a part of ourselves that speaks only in hushes, only in presence, only in stillness. Close your eyes now, not to shut the world out, but to open an inner ear. Listen not for sound, but for what moves beneath it, because the next question is already rising from the dark that watches in return. The awareness behind darkness. There's a moment just before sleep when all visuals dissolve. No shapes, no forms, no more colors to cling to. Just a velvet blackness that hums in its own quiet way. Yet something remains. Something is still. Here. Two voices whisper across the dim of a bedroom lit only by a street lamp glow leaking through the curtain. "Can you still see me?" one asks, eyes closed. "No," the other says with a small smile. "But I know you're there." This knowing, this gentle certainty, is not tied to the eyes. When the world fades into shadow, there is still an inner lantern flickering quietly in your chest, not a flame of light, but a flame of attention, of being. In the darkest room, when even the outline of your hand disappears, you remain aware, not as a watcher of things, but as presence itself. The body doesn't vanish when the light goes out. It simply ceases to need permission from the eyes. The breath continues. The thoughts soften. Yet something watches it all, untouched. A woman walking alone at night might pause at a corner, unsure if she's being followed, or simply imagining it. But it's not her eyes that send the first warning. It's that deep animal alertness that lives below language. The part of you that doesn't blink, that simply knows. If we don't need sight to know we exist, then perhaps sight is only one instrument in a much wider symphony of perception. What if there's something inside you that doesn't sleep, doesn't age, and isn't dependent on the sun or the moon? You've felt it before, lying in bed, unsure whether you're awake or dreaming, and suddenly you realize you're observing, not passively, but completely immersed. Like a tide pulling back before a wave crashes. There is emptiness, but never absence. A man sits silently beside his mother's hospital bed. Her eyes are closed, her breathing shallow. "I don't know if she hears me," he whispers, "but I still talk." He doesn't need proof. Awareness is beyond proof. What if that same silent witness is with you always? Not a voice, not a thought, just presence, software undemanding. It doesn't need language, it doesn't need confirmation, it doesn't even need you to believe in it. It simply is. And perhaps that's the truth behind the darkness, that even when light is gone and the senses retreat, the deepest part of you remains, still, receptive, not seeing, but knowing. So as your eyelids fall and the world vanishes behind them, let that awareness hold you. You don't need to see to be seen. You don't need to look to be found. Let yourself fall, not into sleep, but into that quiet watching that never leaves. The next breath will ask not that you understand, but that you surrender. The art of letting go. There's a quiet wisdom in the body that the mind often forgets. Every breath we exhale is a surrender, a gentle release of what no longer needs to be held. Yet the mind, so used to gripping, defining, holding, is hesitant. We cling to names, to stories, to a self we've worked hard to sculpt. We replay memories like worn-out records, convinced that if we let them go, we might lose who we are. We grip tightly to control, believing that without it, chaos will swallow us whole. But the truth is softer than that. Letting go is not the same as giving up. It is not forgetting or erasing. It's not a weakness. It's a return to what's beneath the grasping, a return to what breathes without being asked to, a return to trust, like waves trusting the shore to catch them again and again. In the dim light of a sleepless hour, two voices emerge in the dark. Do you ever wonder what you'd be without all the things you try to hold on to? A pause, then a reply. Sometimes I think I'm just the sum of all my fears of losing. The room is quiet, but the weight of the words lingers. There's something deeply human in that confession. We've learned to measure safety by what we possess, tangible or not, a title, a relationship, an old grief. Even suffering can become familiar enough to clutch. But letting go doesn't mean erasing these parts of us. It means allowing space between them. It means loosening the grip just enough to feel the breath again, standing beside a river, and everything you've been clinging to floats by. You don't jump in. You simply watch. The current carries each memory, each belief, each tightly held expectation away, not to destroy them, but to cleanse their weight from your chest. Letting go, then, becomes an art, not a dramatic farewell, but 1,000 small releases, a sigh after an argument, a smile after a loss, the decision not to respond when your ego demands to be right. It is in those quiet choices that surrender becomes sacred. I held on to something for years. One voice says again, softer now, the idea that I had to be a certain way to be loved. When I let that go, I didn't lose love. I finally made room for it. There is silence, but it is no longer empty. It's full of exhale, of soft unraveling, of space once filled with tension, now filled with peace. What opens when you let go of resistance? A door, perhaps, not to escape, but to return, to presence, to aliveness, to the place where you no longer have to define the moment, but can simply be in it. Exhale now, gently. The next question awaits, not from effort, but from the stillness that follows release. What awakens when everything else rests? Let the night carry you there. Let go and listen. The self that awakens in sleep. Who's there when you're no longer thinking? There's a strange familiarity in that blank space. When thoughts dissolve like mist and the usual chatter inside your mind goes quiet, you're not performing. You're not remembering what to do or who to be. Still, something continues. A breath moves, a heart beats, not in response to anything, not chasing or resisting, just being. Have you ever had a night, one voice says softly, where you woke up and didn't remember who you were for a few seconds? The other answers after a pause, yeah, and strangely, it didn't scare me. It felt peaceful. It's like I was still me. The first continues, just not the version with all the baggage. In that depth of sleep, there is no name, no job, no fear of what tomorrow might bring. The ego, so busy during the day, goes dormant, but something more subtle stays behind, unshaped by language or memory. It's not a blankness. It's a fullness too quiet to describe. And maybe, just maybe, that quiet presence is closer to who you truly are than the noisy identity you carry around all day. Not a person performing roles, but awareness itself, the kind that doesn't need a story to exist. It doesn't need proof or affirmation. It doesn't argue and it never interrupts. It simply is. Think of the body lying still, not watching the clock, not composing a reply, and yet its rhythm continues, without orders, without a plan. The breath enters, the breath leaves, the chest rises like a tide, then falls again, trusting something ancient and soft beneath the surface. There's something comforting about that, knowing there is a part of you that does not need to be smart, brave, or productive, a part untouched by ambition, untouched even by pain. The still lake beneath all your storms, you see it in quiet moments, like when you stare too long at the sky and lose the sense of where your thoughts end and space begins. Or when you're so exhausted you forget your worries, and for a fleeting second, you're just there. And someone might ask, so if I'm not my thoughts when I sleep, what am I? Maybe you'd answer, you're the field the dreams pass through. Or maybe you'd say nothing, and that silence would be truer than any answer. The world teaches us to define ourselves by what we do. But this part of you, this awareness, asks for nothing. It gives, but it does not need. It watches, but it does not chase. It's not interested in impressing or fixing or planning. And yet, it is profoundly alive. Not alive like a machine, always moving, but alive like still water, holding the reflection of the moon without grasping at it. Let yourself rest in that, not because you have to figure it all out, but because you don't. because the self that awakens in sleep isn't demanding to be known. It just wants to hold you gently as you drift into the place where identity fades, but existence remains. Let that version of you be enough. And now, we step into the quietest questions of all. The sacred secret in stillness. There is a kind of silence that doesn't feel empty, not the kind that screams with awkwardness or echoes with loneliness, but something else, something so full, so present, that it feels like the air is listening. That stillness, it's not a void, it's not nothingness. It is a presence so complete, it needs no sound to declare itself. Beneath every mental storm, beneath the chatter of lists and memories and what-ifs, there is a quiet place inside you, a temple not built by hands, no walls, no roof, just space, and the sacred hush that has always been there. Do you ever just sit and feel like something's watching you, but in a peaceful way? Like what? Like the universe, maybe, or your soul. Like stillness itself sees you. Yeah, when I stop trying to figure things out, I start to feel that. Like maybe I don't need to be understood, just felt. Stillness doesn't demand your attention. It waits, and in that waiting, it holds a secret. Not the kind you stumble across, but the kind you become when everything else is stripped away. When you stop running toward answers, you begin to become one. We often seek truth in noise, in books, in advice, in thoughts chasing thoughts. But what if the truth you're hunting has been quietly sitting in the chair across from you this whole time, saying nothing, just breathing, waiting for you to stop and notice? It's unsettling at first. The mind doesn't like being ignored. It spins louder, desperate for relevance. But if you're patient, if you dare to let the noise collapse, what remains is not empty, it's sacred. You start to sense that the deepest parts of you have never once spoken a word, and yet they know everything. Have you ever felt like you're not supposed to pray with words sometimes? Yeah, like silence is enough? Or more than enough? Like silence is the prayer. I think that's where the answers come from. Not loud, just clear. In this stillness, time bends. You no longer feel like you're waiting for anything. You're just there. And oddly, that presence makes you feel like everything is okay, even if nothing outside has changed, because something inside has. You've touched that untouchable thing. You've stepped into the temple, not to ask, not to fix, just to remember. And maybe that's the secret no one tells you. Stillness isn't a lack of action. It's a return, a coming home to what has never left you, but what you've been too distracted to notice. So breathe now, as if the air is sacred. Let your heartbeat be the drum of a quiet ceremony, the one that begins in the space between thoughts and continues in the hush of what cannot be explained. Let that stillness hold you. And from its silence, a new question rises, softly, curiously, like mist from a forgotten shore. The dream beneath the dream. Somewhere between the hush of night and the weightlessness before sleep, there's a flicker, a sliver of awareness that whispers, "Is this too not a dream?" You've had them before, dreams that held your body like a memory, where rooms felt lived in and faces had names your waking mind never knew. You woke with a gasp once, didn't you? Not from fear, but from the ache of leaving something that felt more real than your morning coffee. Now pause, let that breath linger, because here's the thought. What if you never truly woke? What if this life with its missed buses, birthday candles, chipped mugs, and arguments over nothing is simply another layer, a slower dream wearing the mask of permanence. Two friends sit at a train station, half asleep under the blue flicker of a vending machine light. "Did you ever feel like none of this sticks?" one asks. The other shrugs, half amused. "Like what?" "Like, I press the elevator button but I never remember the ride up, or I talk for hours and leave with no voice but no memory of what I said." Their silence is mutual, not uncomfortable, just suspended, like the train that never quite arrives. And it's in those little suspensions, those flickers between moments, that the idea slips through the cracks. If this is a dream, whose is it? Some say the dreamer is the self. Others suggest it's the universe itself, curled up in its own reflection. You might be both, or neither. Perhaps you are the breath between sleepers, the echo, not the voice. Now think of your life not as a timeline, but as a narrative written in water. You reach out to shape it, and it ripples away. Your childhood, your regrets, your small triumphs. Maybe they're memories in a story the dreamer tells itself for comfort. And still, everything continues. The traffic lights blink. The mail arrives. A neighbor waters their plants. None of it feels like illusion, yet all of it floats just slightly above the floor of certainty. Someone at a cafe gestures toward the window, mid-conversation. You ever get that feeling that we're all just playing our parts? Like someone's watching? No one responds. Not because it's strange, but because it's familiar. Too familiar. So what happens if the dreamer stirs? Will the world dissolve like mist at dawn, or will it merely shift, like a camera panning to reveal the offstage crew? Maybe the waking is not dramatic. No loud crash or revelation, just a soft, internal click. A gentle unfurling of awareness, and in that awareness you find something humbling. The dream doesn't need to be false to be meaningful. Even illusions can hold truth. Even sleep can heal. So rest easy, for now. Let the question remain unanswered. Let it drift. The next idea is already forming, humming just below the surface of what you call real. The Ghost of Innocence. There was once a time, not so long ago, when shadows whispered stories, and raindrops on windows became wandering messengers from another world. You didn't need reasons to laugh or music to dance. A cardboard box was a spaceship, a puddle, a portal. The world was vast, mysterious, and enough in itself. This wasn't foolishness. It was presence, a full-bodied acceptance of now, without needing to analyze or explain it. "Do you remember?" she asks him softly one night, as they lie on the couch with the television humming forgotten in the background. "When we used to play hide and seek for hours in the garden and believe the trees were watching us?" He smiles faintly. "Yeah, and I thought the moon was following me home every time I rode my bike at night." They don't laugh. Not really, because that memory still feels real, almost sacred. But somewhere along the way, we were taught to stop believing in wonder, to trade imagination for logic, to choose strategy over joy. And in that bargain, something essential began to fade. Not just the games or the fantasies, but the very ability to be here, truly here, with life as it is. Growing up was never really about becoming wiser. Sometimes it meant becoming heavier, with assumptions, with roles, with the need to appear certain. We began to explain away the magic. "That's just wind," we said, instead of listening to what it might be trying to say. "It's only a shadow," forgetting that our very fears and dreams live in shadows too. What if we've mistaken maturity for forgetting? What if what we called childish was actually a kind of deeper perception, one that saw through appearances and into the shimmering fabric of the now? The innocence we shed like an old skin, may not have been something to outgrow, but something we were meant to carry with us, not as naivety, but as presence, as sacred receptivity. "Do you think that child version of us still exists?" she whispers. He looks at her, eyes clouded with memory. "I think he's still playing, somewhere inside, just waiting for us to remember the rules of the game." And maybe that's what this moment is. A gentle reintroduction, a remembering, not of facts, but of feeling, of the way the world once vibrated with a quiet sense of belonging, of how we didn't need to understand everything to feel connected to it, of how our hearts moved in rhythm with something invisible, yet utterly real. To remember is not to rewind time. It's to touch that inner ghost of innocence and invite it home again, to look at the sky not just as weather, but as a canvas for wonder, to let a breeze surprise you, to walk barefoot and notice the song in the ground, and maybe to smile when nothing seems perfect, simply because your soul recognizes that joy isn't always about reason. It's about remembering. So as your breath softens and the edges of thought begin to blur, let that child within you smile again. Let them peek through the cracks of adulthood and remind you, you were once whole in the simplest things, and you still are. The night holds its breath now. The next question waits like a dream you once had and left behind. The dreams you abandoned. At some point, we stop reaching for the stars, not because they're too far, but because we've learned how to live with ceilings, not because we don't care anymore, but because we've grown used to caring only for what we can afford to lose. The question isn't when you gave up on your dreams, it's whether they ever really left. Do you remember the version of yourself who once stayed up late sketching cities that didn't exist? Or rehearsed conversations with people you hadn't met yet, but knew you'd love? Those weren't childish fictions. They were blueprints, the earliest whispers of who you were meant to become. In the quiet of adulthood, something gets traded, not all at once. First, you let go of the dance classes, too expensive. Then the screenplay, too risky. The bakery idea, too late. The film school application, too foolish. You didn't say goodbye. You said, maybe next year, and then quietly, never again. A woman once said to a stranger at a train station, "I used to dream of being a pilot." He paused, sipping his coffee, eyes soft. "What happened?" "I learned how to pay rent." She smiled, but in her voice was a shadow of wind over clouds, like part of her still flew. The funny thing is, dreams don't leave the room when you stop chasing them. They shrink into the corners, curl around your routines, and wait. Sometimes they stir when a certain song plays in a grocery store. Sometimes they visit you at 2:13 a.m., asking questions like, what if you had tried? What would life look like now? There's no judgment in this, only wonder. Because what if those dreams weren't reckless, but sacred? What if they were the truest instructions you ever received, and you misunderstood them as fantasy? And what if you never actually gave them up, but buried them alive beneath phrases like realistic expectations, grown-up responsibilities, or just getting by? A boy once said to his friend on a rainy sidewalk, "I used to want to build robots that felt emotions." The other boy replied without mockery, "Maybe you still could. You just started with your own heart first." You see, dreams don't expire. They transform. A song left unsung may become a kind word you offer a stranger. A book unwritten might live inside the way you tell bedtime stories to your child. The old architecture plans might find their way into the way you arrange furniture. With precision, with harmony, with vision. But some dreams ache louder than others. They knock on the door not to haunt you, but to remind you there's still time. Maybe not to become a concert pianist, but to touch the keys again. Maybe not to start the cafe, but to bake and share and feel the quiet joy of creation. There is no failure in abandoning a dream. The failure lies in forgetting it ever mattered. Because the version of you who once believed deserves to be remembered, not with shame, but with tenderness. Sometimes the most courageous thing isn't to chase the old dream. It's to forgive yourself for letting it go and ask what part of it is still reachable. Now listen carefully, not to the world, but to the echo that's been hiding in your chest since you learned to settle. It's quiet, but insistent, and it doesn't ask for perfection, only attention. Because now we drift into the silence before endings, where the loudest truths are spoken without sound, and the next question rises, not like thunder, but like breath in a still room. The final question. Somewhere between the hush of your thoughts and the weight of your blanket, there is something left, something untouched. In a world that measures everything, your steps, your likes, your heart rate, your habits, there remains one presence they can't trace. Not a biometric signature, not a digital echo, but a witness, a silent observer behind your eyes, watching it all, still, unnamed. Hey, do you ever feel like there's someone watching you, but not in a creepy way? Yeah, like not someone else, but you watching yourself, like when you cry, and another part of you is calmly observing the tears. Exactly. Like there's the one who feels, and then the one who notices you're feeling. I've never put that into words, but yeah, that part of me, it doesn't panic, it just watches. Even in a soft dystopia, where ads finish your sentences and machines predict your next move, this part of you cannot be programmed. It doesn't click. It doesn't buy. It doesn't respond to push notifications. It only watches, breathing quietly in the back of your mind. It is not the self that responds to emails or takes selfies or gets tagged in memories. It is the self beneath that, the one that doesn't need a name, the one that remains when you're alone with yourself, when the phone is off and the lights dim low. That version of you that is not curated for anyone else's eyes, that version that doesn't need to perform, just be. The final question isn't about technology. It's not about freedom or control. It's not even about identity as society defines it. It's a question of being. Are you still here? Not the role you played today, not the statistics you contributed to, not even the story you tell about yourself. Just you, quiet, present, watching. The strange thing is, once you recognize that silent observer within you, it feels like you've always known it was there. Like remembering an old friend who never really left. It has no agenda, no timeline, no script. It doesn't care about your achievements or your regrets. It simply stays, through all of it, asleep or awake, joyful or torn apart. It watches you breathe. Do you think that's who we really are? You mean that silent part, the watcher? Yeah, the one that doesn't flinch, doesn't react, just notices. I think that's the only part that doesn't change. Then maybe that's the part that survives all the noise. And now, here we are, the end of all questions. Nothing left to ask, nothing left to analyze. Just you, being. So let go now. Let the questions dissolve into the softness of the night. Let your thoughts fall like feathers into silence. That quiet watcher within you is already resting, and maybe, just maybe, that is the truest version of you. Breathe, not to wake, but to drift, to return home, to fall asleep. The courage to be still. There is a moment when the world leans in and waits for your next move, your reply, your post, your action. And in that moment, you do something quietly radical. You don't move. You don't scroll. You just pause. Stillness in this world isn't encouraged. It isn't trending. It doesn't get likes or promotions. But it's here, thick as honey, warm as dusk, waiting for those brave enough to sit inside it without needing to prove they're worthy of rest. He said nothing as the train pulled away, just stood on the platform while others rushed past. She noticed the pause, the breath between his blinks, and asked, "You all right?" He nodded. "Yeah, just choosing not to chase anything right now." There's something so quietly valiant about that choice, to not respond, not engage, not produce. Stillness is not emptiness. It's a reclaimed territory. It's saying, my worth isn't tied to how fast I reply or how much I do. Stillness is where the soul reminds the body, you are not a task. Even nature withdraws. The ocean recedes before its fiercest wave. Trees go still before the wind moves them. So why not you? In a society tuned to the frequency of alerts and metrics, silence can feel dangerous. Doing nothing can make you feel guilty. But what if you're not failing? What if you're healing? He was staring at the ceiling, arms resting over his chest, when she whispered beside him, "You're being unusually quiet tonight." "I know," he murmured. "It's the only way I remember I'm not a cog." Stillness is how you leave the algorithm. It's the off-ramp to remembering who you are without assignments, without edits, without identity performance. You sit, you breathe, you become. And here's the unspoken truth. Sometimes the most productive thing you can do is nothing. But not the kind of nothing that's laced with guilt or twitchy avoidance. This is a sacred kind of stillness, the kind that repairs, the kind that dares to say, this moment is enough. What if peace wasn't a prize you chase after the burnout, after the breakdown, after the checklist is finished, but something that was yours all along? What if peace was not earned, but remembered? Someone might ask you tomorrow why you didn't do more, why you didn't answer the message, post the thing, attend the call. You could say it softly, without defense, because I needed to not disappear into the noise. And maybe that's the real rebellion. Stillness doesn't broadcast itself. It hums. It cradles. It reminds you of the you beneath all effort. Not a machine, not a brand, just breath, spine, skin, soul, being. And in this moment, that is enough. Inhale now, not to prepare for action, but to stay. Let the inhale be your banner. Let your exhale be your retreat. You are not here to conquer time. You are here to live inside it. Let the stillness stretch without needing to be filled. And as it expands, gently, wordlessly, it asks, what if this, right here, was already meaningful? Let that question settle. We're not done yet. The next mystery unfolds in the quiet curve of that question. What does it mean to mean something at all? The endless search. It begins with a whisper, barely a need, more like a sensation. The mind, curious and restless, searches for something definite, a conclusion, a clean line drawn under the messiness of life. It seeks answers like a hand groping in the dark for a light switch, aching to make sense of what has none. But some nights, under the hush of dim ceilings and quiet breath, that search becomes tender. The urgency slows, and in its place comes a soft ache. Not for knowledge, but for peace. "Do you think we'll ever figure it out?" she asks, her voice low, tucked into the folds of her pillow. He exhales slowly, eyes tracing the ceiling fan as if it held a secret code. "Figure what out?" "You know, the point of it all." He smiles faintly, not mockingly, but with the kindness of someone who's asked the same question 1,000 times. Maybe it's not there to be figured out. Maybe it's something we're meant to feel, like music, when you stop trying to break it down and just let it wash over you. There's a pause, a silence that isn't empty, but full of shared breath, unsaid thoughts, and that sacred moment when the mind pauses just before it names things. Because what if meaning isn't an answer? What if it's a pause in the question, a moment of stillness in the rhythm of doubt? The mind wants to know. It always has. It spins and loops, rummaging through memories, philosophies, logic, even dreams, in pursuit of a thread that ties everything together. But life, in its softness, doesn't always offer closure. It offers glimpses. A child's laugh on a rainy morning, the comfort of a familiar scent, the silence that follows a long-needed cry. Those moments don't explain anything, and yet they make everything feel worth it. That's the paradox the mind keeps missing. Meaning isn't found. It's felt. Somewhere deep down, there's a longing for surrender, not in defeat, but in trust. A letting go of the chase. The realization that the most profound truths don't speak in words or equations, but in vibrations. A sunset doesn't argue its purpose. It simply is. And you love it not because you understand it, but because it moves something inside you that logic never could. "I guess it's like standing at the edge of the ocean," she whispers, eyes half closed now. "And knowing it'll never answer you," he replies, "but still feeling like you belong to it." Yeah, exactly that. And maybe that's the heart of the endless search, not to conclude it, but to become tender enough to feel it, to stop demanding life to be a puzzle with a missing piece, and instead to see it as a song that only makes sense when you close your eyes. So let go now. Let go of the need to know, to define, to fix. Let your mind breathe, untethered. The next truth doesn't arrive with proof. It arrives like a feather landing on your chest, soft and weightless. The mystery remains, but your heart can rest. Behind the veil of unknowing, something beautiful waits. The truth that feels like a lie. You've felt it before, haven't you? That strange sensation where something true feels off, like a memory you trust, yet can't explain. A moment so vivid it glows, yet dissolves when touched. It isn't confusion. It's a quiet suspicion. The sense that reality might not always wear honesty on its face. Late at night, under a soft lamp or blinking streetlight, reality begins to twist, not violently, but like warm glass in slow hands. Familiar things seem staged. A voice you hear often suddenly sounds rehearsed. You pause, you blink. "Has this always been like this?" someone asks, and the answer doesn't arrive. It only echoes. Two people sit in a nearly empty cafe. One stares at the window and says, "You ever get the feeling this is all being written as we live it?" The other half laughs. "Like we're reading a script backwards? Number like the story changed midway and no one told us." Reality bends, not in fantasy, but in the tiniest distortions. You forget if the light switch was on or off. You're sure the door was closed, but it isn't. You remember a phrase someone said, only they swear they never said it. These aren't glitches. They're reminders, subtle invitations to question the stability of the lens you've been handed. And then comes the oddest part, the dreams that feel more truthful than the day that followed. Why does that conversation with someone who's no longer alive feel more real than the emails you answered this morning? Why does the image of a place you've never visited seem more familiar than the street you walk daily? Truth, when it doesn't match expectation, can feel like a lie. But perhaps the real error is not in the truth, but in the framework we use to judge it. Plato once warned that what we see is not the real thing, but a shadow, a reflection cast by firelight on the wall of a cave, and we, thinking we know the world, trust the shadows more than the flame. A teenager once asked, "How do I know I'm not dreaming right now?" His older brother shrugged, biting into his sandwich. "You don't." Then, with a laugh that wasn't fully joking, added, "Maybe we're both dreams someone else is having." And in that moment, the bread felt too dry, the light too bright, the air too still. The map is not the land. The simulation is not the soul. If you navigate your life by assumptions alone, you might find yourself circling the same mirage, believing it's a destination. Letting go doesn't mean floating into fiction. It means loosening your grip on a version of reality that insists it's the only one. When what feels like a lie begins to hum with quiet resonance, maybe it's not false. Maybe it's just unfamiliar truth. Truth not written in logic, but in sensation. The kind that doesn't demand belief, only presence. And so, if nothing makes perfect sense right now, maybe that's not a failure of your mind. Maybe it's the doorway cracking open. Breathe, not to explain, not to solve, but to soften into the ambiguity. Because the final illusion waits, and it isn't about truth. It's the whisper that anything ever ends. Eternal recurrence. What if tonight, as you closed your eyes, a gentle voice whispered a question, not to your ears, but to the place deeper than dreams? What if you had to live this life again, and again, forever? It doesn't come as a threat. There's no fire, no punishment, no reward, just repetition, soft, eternal. The same mornings, the same loves, the same mistakes, every sigh, every belly laugh, every silent ache you tried to hide beneath your smile. Imagine the clock looping, not forward, but in circles. No exit, no escape, just recurrence. Nietzsche's question is not a riddle, it's a mirror. He called it the eternal return, a thought experiment that doesn't ask what will happen, but what if what has happened is all there ever is, forever. The point isn't to scare, it's to reveal. Because if you had to relive each moment of your life, down to every unnoticed gesture, every trivial regret, every tear and thrill, would you still say yes to this exact script? Would you do it all again? One voice wonders in the dark. I don't know. The other replies quietly. I think about the hurt, the things I wish I'd said, the days I wasted pretending to be someone I wasn't. Yeah, the first voice sighs. But what about the quiet mornings? The way your dog looked at you like you were the only person in the world? The night you laughed so hard you forgot what sadness felt like? A pause, then softer. I think I'd want those again. We often live like this. Life is a draft, a rough sketch we can eventually clean up. But what if it's not a draft? What if this is the final copy, and you are choosing it over and over with every breath? The idea of eternal recurrence doesn't demand perfection. It asks for presence. It asks, are you living in a way that you'd be proud to repeat? Not grand gestures, not success or fame, just this moment. Would you choose it again? And if not, Why not? What would you change? What would you say now, knowing you're not rehearsing life? You're living the loop already? Sometimes it's the ordinary things that echo longest in eternity. The touch of sun on your face during a morning walk, the way your fingers curl around a warm cup, the phone call you almost didn't make, the apology you still owe. These are not small moments. These are the ones that come back and back and back. I think I'd live differently if I knew it all came around again, one voice admits. Would you? The other asks. Or would you finally start living the way you always wanted to? Maybe that's the real meaning behind the thought. Not fear of repetition, but awakening through it. A gentle wake-up call dressed as a philosophical puzzle, a permission slip quietly signed in the dark. You can start over, right now, not because time resets, but because awareness does. So tonight, let this echo stretch gently across the sky of your mind. Feel the question settle, not as pressure, but as peace. If you had to live this life, this exact one, on loop forever, would you finally say yes to all of it? The next question is waiting, not about time anymore, but about you, about being, about presence. Let the echo of your choices ripple softly now, into the stillness beyond. The last ethical question. When the world finally quiets, when the echo of news, of notifications, of negotiations with yourself all fall still, what remains? Not your to-do list, not your worries about tomorrow, not even the image in the mirror that you've rehearsed 100 times today. There is something else. Something that doesn't speak, doesn't try, doesn't chase. It simply watches, not with judgment, but with a gentleness that feels older than thought. Hey, someone once whispered to you in a hallway, their voice nearly lost in the shuffle of passing feet. You look like you've been somewhere far away. You smiled, not quite sure how to answer. But inside, you knew. You had been far, somewhere thought couldn't reach, and maybe that's where you're drifting now. In that space, titles dissolve. You're not the employee, the partner, the parent, the dreamer, or even the thinker. You're just here, a presence, quiet and still as moonlight on an empty lake. Have you felt it before? That moment just before sleep takes you, when everything is both distant and close, when the edges blur and something within you exhales without needing permission. I don't even know who I am when no one's watching, someone says quietly across a small kitchen table at 2 a.m. The other person stirs their tea, smiles, and replies, maybe that's the only version of you that was ever real. Then silence. A beautiful, understanding silence, the kind that doesn't need to explain itself. It's in that silence that the last question waits, not loud, not demanding, just gently there, like a doorway with no sign. What if rest isn't a pause, but a return, not to sleep, but to yourself, the part of you untouched by labels, beyond even memory, the self that doesn't need defending or fixing, the self that knows without words. You might think this sounds like forgetting, but what if it's remembering? Not a fact, but a feeling, like the way your body knows how to float when you stop trying to swim. Someone once asked, "Are you okay?" And you said, "Yeah, just tired." But what you meant was, tired of becoming, tired of performing, tired of not knowing how to stop. Tonight there's no performance, no spotlight, just the slow return to the witness beneath all becoming. And that witness doesn't sleep the way minds do. It rests the way stars do, by simply being there. So let go now. Let the weight of identity slip from your shoulders like an old coat. You won't need it here. Let your name fall away into the hush. Let even the questions dissolve like ink in water. You are safe. You are held. Not by answers, but by the peace of not needing them. Let your mind soften into the fabric of sleep. Let the breath come and go like tides. Let the last illusion of effort, of separation, of needing to be anyone, fade into nothing. And in that gentle nothing, you'll find the quietest, deepest something. And now, the questions have softened, like footprints in sand slowly disappearing beneath the tide. Let them fade. You don't need to carry them into your dreams. Perhaps the final paradox is this, that in a world obsessed with answers, peace begins in the pause. That maybe the soul speaks not in language, but in silence. Tonight, nothing needs to be named. Nothing needs to be fixed. You are here. That is enough. Drift now into the still space where time dissolves, where thought no longer holds the pen, and where being, simply being, becomes the most profound response of all. Sleep well, wanderer, and may your dreams ask even softer questions.